Boom, baby, we're live. Welcome to Interview with the Man, episode 594. I'm joined here by my great friend, Paul from Apex Mindset. And today we're going to talk about Her Body Count Matters. Paul, good morning. How you doing?
Hello. Good morning, my friend. I am doing great. Doing great. Ready to talk
Glad,
about notches and piss everybody off. Let's do it.
glad to have a member. Glad to have a member of Rule Zero who's actually getting some pussy on the panel.
Oh, yeah, no shit.
No, I always say this, guys. Paul is a great friend of mine, and honestly, like, there's just not enough credit given to you at all, Paul. It's literally just like you are so undervalued. Like, I'm waiting for you to blow up and just forget about me one day.
That'll never happen. I won't forget about you, man. I won't blow up either. I'm too, they don't like me. The
no,
algorithms hate me.
You're already killing it, man. You're absolutely killing it. So we got to talk about this, right?
Yeah.
We both have I think the reason why both of us are pretty good at understanding the deeper side of female nature compared to just like surface layer, pick up and bang girls is because we both have been in relationships with chicks who like clinically had borderline personality disorder. Not like, oh, she's a BPD chick because Rolo said so on a stream. Because like everybody talks like my ex is BPD. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
and then then one more thing I want to add to that is like we both dated girls who had like really high body count.
Yeah.
And how like, I mean, it's just not. It's a lot to deal with. It's a mess, quite frankly.
It is a mess.
Total mess.
Well, and it's the science doesn't. There's not really much confusion when you look at the science behind it. It's just it's not popular with feminist theory to look at the science. And that's the thing. See, feminist theory assumes that there isn't a genetic component or a biological component to sexual preferences and gender identity and things of that nature. It assumes more or less that it's all social conditioning and by choice, or at least mostly that. And so it gives a lot more weight on, personal like choices, like you can choose to be whatever gender you want to be, and you can make these choices versus having it be genetically or biologically determined, And then to add into that too, it assumes that there's no neurological or genetic consequences to your behavior.
Right.
But there is no, like, anyone who's a neurologist or biologist would laugh at the idea that there's no consequences on a neurological or biological level for your behavior. Like, that's insane because your brain, it makes different neural connections every day, every time you learn something or do something.
Right.
And so, a simple concept for the audience is like, you may have heard, you get what you feed. If you're a negative person and you feed negativity, you're going to get more negative outcomes, outputs, right? This is a basic thing. And they've deduced this to neurological processes. The connections in your brain that connects you to, hormones like cortisol and stress hormones and bad thoughts and bad feelings and anxiety, you're stimulating that more and more, which makes it easier for you to do that and harder than for you to do more positive things. For example, we know this, and most even feminists wouldn't disagree with that, statement, but that all of a sudden we throw sex in there and we say, well, maybe we're going to criticize open hypergamy and opportunity to just mate switch and do whatever you want because maybe it's not good for your brain neurologically. As soon as we bring that idea out, everyone squeals and cries about it and yells at us for being misogynists and slut shamers. But it's obviously completely nonsense. When women do behaviors, especially ones that hit their main genetic imperative, which is mating, she starts instilling those behaviors and therefore not conditioning or instilling other behaviors. So it's not even so much about being alpha widowed, which we can talk about that. That's a thing for sure. But it's really just if you're practicing transactional short-term relationships where you treat yourself and other people like they're disposable, well, what happens is that is the behavior you've conditioned. And if she does that for 30, 40 notches, that's her default mechanism now. And so now,
let me build on that to make it simpler for the audience, because
yeah. I need you to
so
do that for me. This is your audience.
well, for me, everybody knows I'm the dummy, and so I just I simplify it for myself. You know what I mean? So, so you're saying that, and I think this ties into neuroplasticity. Let me know if I'm right or wrong.
That's correct.
Okay. So we are like they've been saying it since the dawn of civilization, right? Like I think it was what some famous philosopher says: we are the sum of our habits, right?
Yeah.
And so that's like, the saying is true, but also literally the biology of that is true. And that's because when we make decisions in our brain, we fire certain neural pathways. These are called synapses in our mind. And the more we fire these synapses, it becomes like carved out in our brain to do these things. That's why if you're really good at something, I'll just use a simple example. Like if you're really good at Call of Duty, right? We put down the controller for 2 years. You can come back and pick up that controller and still have a certain above average skill set in Call of Duty because you have literally formulated your brain to be good at that. The same thing happens with these chicks when they are consistently getting pumped and dumped and treating men as these disposable objects. Of course, every woman is saying she's the victim. She's the one being pumped and dumped. The guy was a narcissist, blah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they have a whore handbook that they pass around. It's hilarious. It happens over here with the westernized Japanese girls. Like, oh my God, he's such a narcissist. He's this, he's that. And it's funny because they're projecting their own fucking narcissism.
Yeah.
But so you're saying that by women repeatedly doing this behavior, it becomes a default pattern, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we have a saying in the training world, say firearms or whatever, that we don't rise to our expectations, we fall to our level of training. Wow. And this points exactly to how our brains are neurologically wired. So we see this a lot, though, in the training world, where guys think that in the actual fight or in the conflict, they're going to have some powers that are going to get them out of, the situation better, that they're going to perform better in a way than how they're going to perform in training under like less stress. Right. And that never pans out. You know what I mean? And we fall just like the Call of Duty example, if a guy does, let's say, a concealed pistols license, training, and he learns some basics on how to deploy his pistol, and he doesn't train for 5 years, what happens if he's in a threat and he has to use his pistol is he's going to default to his training that he did 5 years ago, provided he neurologically imprinted that in his brain. So if he neurologically imprinted drawing a certain way, pointing center mass, you know what I mean, focusing on the target, squeezing the trigger a bunch of times, whatever neural pattern he developed in doing that, that's what he's going to fall to because he hasn't trained and reconditioned into something different. You know what I mean? And so that's, essentially what we're dealing with is in a basic level is that you're going to fall to your training. And so if she's gone through 30 toxic relationships, what's her level of training now to have a healthy one with you? It's not there. So she has to now put in an extraordinary amount of effort in order to be a healthy relationship partner and to be normal.
Yeah.
Now that's just assuming that oxytocin isn't a thing. Okay. And so when we start dealing with bonding mechanisms now, oxytocin and vasopressin, and we can look at this through certain primate species and mammals, that we can take blood samples and look at stuff in a way we couldn't with humans because it'd be unethical. And we look at animals that are monogamous, species are semi-monogamous. And we can see through tests that would be unethical to do on humans, when we force multiple partners on them, essentially by removing them from their pair bond for a period of time, and then we put them with another mate selection to mate with, their levels of oxytocin, vasopressin, and their bonding chemicals are measurably lower, to a point when you go past a couple for the animals anyways, for like the prairie voles, for example, if you try to go past 2 partners, there's no bonding left at all. They're just not bonded. They may not even be interested. Now, prairie voles aren't human beings, but they are mammals, and there are neurochemical similarities in terms of oxytocin and vasopressin, which are the bonding chemicals we have. And we mainly know oxytocin as that love chemical. But it just stands to reason. She loses her virginity, falls in love with a guy when she's 15. Oxytocin bonding is high. She doesn't have to try to redesign that. She sleeps with you after the second date and you're the 35th guy, right? Like, and when I say 35th guy, I'm not even slut shaming her. That's just a normal thing. If she's like a 28-year-old girl, it's pretty normal, And I mean, it's not to shame women. I do want to say that because people will jump on and they'll immediately fall into one or two camps. Yeah, these 304s ain't shit. Or you're just a misogynist, and you have something against women who sleep with a bunch of people. I don't have anything against women who sleep with who've racked their notches up. I've had a good time with those women, quite frankly. It's not anything against them. I wish that they could bond. I wish it was something where they could be promiscuous and I could have a good time in my male hoe phases of my life, and everybody could move on and be happy and then just pair bond and there wasn't an issue. That would be wonderful, but it's just not realistic. It's just not what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I refuse to coddle them, because if you're going to sit there and demand equal rights and equal whatever, when it's clearly not equal, women have superior rights and shit in society.
Oh, yeah.
Part of those rights is accountability for your actions. Because if you want freedom of choice and you want to have freedom of doing whatever men can do, then you also need to deal with the repercussions, the consequences of your actions. A lot of women don't think very far ahead about anything in life. Like, they are very in the now, in the moment kind of people.
Yep.
And they don't really think about, hey, what's going to happen? What are the consequences? Because I always say this, right? The ghost of Dick Mispass always comes to haunt them. Always comes to haunt them. Haunts them for the rest of their life.
That's right. Chatter Tyrone comes boogie around the corner, at night and calls to her. Oh.
And like I said, we were talking, like it haunts them and in their mental stability. I mean,
no, it does though. It does. I mean, we joke about it, but it's true.
Yeah, it's clearly documented. I did a breakdown of a study earlier this year, and so casual sex affects both genders negatively. A large amount of casual sex does affect, but it
affects women worse.
Yeah, the disparity in how it affects women versus men is like absolutely monumental.
Absolutely.
There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. So earlier today, Rollo Tomasi and Michael Sartain were on the Fresh and Fit show, and they're talking about body count stuff. But Michael Sartain, I don't think he really truly understands on a biological level what's going on, because the girl cornered him and asked him, and he answered to the question, like, why does it affect women differently than it affects men? And he couldn't answer it, but he was so confident in the way he was answering that he just danced around it, and I don't think he even realized he didn't answer it.
Yeah, so that's a simple scientific answer, but I have a stack of papers on this. Like, this isn't even.
So that's what I want to present to you. So
yeah,
why does it? Because a woman can have sex with one man, right, 1,000 times, and it'll not scramble her eggs. Right. But if she has sex with 50 guys one time each, that scrambles her brain and fucks her up, gives her anxiety, gives her bad relationship. She has no relationship development skills. She has short-term mating strategies, which are really, I mean, what is the strategy of short-term mating? Like, get used and thrown away? That's your strategy?
Yes.
You know what I mean? So what would you say that?
Yeah. So, first look at it. Difference between men and women has to do with the neurological way in which we bond. And it has to do, there's more complicated, obviously, than the short answer I'm going to give. I'm a neurologist enough to give short answers on YouTube. You'll have to talk to the actual researchers to get the science and the papers and the numbers. But it's that men, we bond with a mixture of oxytocin and vasopressin that is different than a woman. So a woman is more heavily induced with oxytocin, whereas a man has more of a balance between the oxytocin and vasopressin.
Right. So for the audience's sake, simplicity wise, what does oxytocin do and what does vasopressin do? These are neurochemical hormones, correct?
Correct. Vasopressin is a bond. It makes you feel bonded to the other person in a way in which you want to protect and caretake. Right. Where oxytocin is a bond or you really almost want to be taken care of. You know what I mean? And it's not that clean, but that's about a good way to look at it as far as
protector versus protected.
Pretty much. Yeah. Protected
makes you want to love and protect them more. Oxytocin makes you want to be loved, submit, and be protected more.
Right. And so a woman, you know, bonds with children with a bit more vasopressin, right? She wants to protect those children.
Right. When she's breastfeeding, correct?
Right. Well, and throughout their life, depending on how she's been, associating their child. In other words, the way we associate something or the way we look at something affects the way that our neurochemicals react. You know, if we associate something as a danger in our brains, we'll have a reaction of danger and stress hormones, for example. And so guys have more of this is the thing that gets guys in trouble, but it's also what makes us good partners is we have a caretaking element to women. We want to take care of them. I mean, simping is essentially an aggravated, polluted version of a guy wanting to caretake for a woman, but not having a woman in a healthy relationship to take care of. And so he's like, I'll send you $5,000. I love you, girl with booty on, OnlyFans, right? That's just a polluted version of wanting that need and want to have that vasopressin rush along with, it's not just oxytocin. It's both for guys. So what happens is with guys, we could bond and have the love feelings with multiple women, actually, if we're caretaking for them. And we'll do that in different ways. This is why guys classically would have harems. This is the evolutionary part of it. Why we evolve differently has to do with us just being the more physically dominant sex and, us really being a patriarchy for, as a species. Men were getting the resources and protection. And then, so we had multiple women, you know what I mean? It went from polyamory where everybody was sleeping with each other in the tribe to one guy running more or less a harem. And when we did that, we shifted in some of our bonding mechanisms in theory. And so guys would caretake for these women, but even in the tribes, that was what the guy's role was. The woman doesn't caretake for a man. She bonds with him and she loves him. You know what I mean? She wants to be with him and protected by him. And she hopes he gives him the resources too, and also cuddles with him,
That's like, going to say that. That's like when you're laying on the couch, you're just doing your own thing and your girl crawls over and snuggles under you. That's the oxytocin. That's her wanting to be loved and protected.
Right. Exactly. And so with a girl, when we weaken that oxytocin bond through multiple notches in that response, well, what ends up happening is they just don't love you as much. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's the simplest way to describe it. The oxytocin correlates to love. They're getting less of that response. It's blunted, and so the more experiences and also the intensity or gravity, whether it's traumatic or whether it's really good or whatever, the intensity of these experiences blunts their ability to have that connection in future experiences. And so when we talk about, and here's some data to show the correlation. So there's a paper.
Just so you guys know too, we're going to review a full study we have here talking about the counterintuitive trends and the link between premarital sex, marriage stability, relationships, and love. So we actually have science that we're going to break down here as well. We're just giving you guys a little bit of a pregame here, but stay tuned because we have a whole paper to go through. And Paul, go ahead and knock it out, what you were going to show there.
Yeah. So I'm just going to reference a couple of papers. There's one, an APA journal release that demonstrated that only 2% of relationships after 8 years are considered what they had 6 categories, and this category was bliss. Okay, like maximum happiness, all categories. It was only 2% after 8 years. But happiness, general happiness, you had 13%. So that means 13 plus 2, so 15% out of a pretty large test sample. Relationships that made it past the 8-year mark, they're pretty happy. 2% bliss, that's hard to reach, but there was some happiness there. The rest were moderately happy to unhappy, meaning there was something missing. There just wasn't a lot there for them. So it's already difficult. It's difficult enough just to have long-term happiness in any sense in your relationships after a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And so to then complicate that by ruining that ability to have that high emotion, do you know what I mean? In the relationship, that emotional feeling of love because of your neurochemicals being modified, and that body mechanism being modified through your past behaviors, that's even just further damaging, especially for the woman, because women tend to process things emotionally first before they make logical choices. And so when she's with when she's with the partner that's not a good choice for her because she's immature and 15 or 16, and her bonding's high, so she'll make a lot of bad choices. The girl who's 21 years old, she's going to make a lot of bad choices, right, for mates, just because she's a young kid and stupid, right? We're all stupid at 21. It's not her fault. Well, what happens is she racks the notches up, and then by the time, let's say she's 28, 29, 30, and she's really looking at settling down, she can make better choices logically, but she doesn't have the emotional buy-in now. She just doesn't feel it. And that's the problem, is they just don't feel the same, and they can't then logically correlate this guy as the better guy, even if he's the better guy for them. They ruin their ability. And another study,
I just want to add on to that. Like, this is why when you meet a girl who has been fucked by a bunch of dudes, they can be cold-hearted bitches.
Yeah.
They can be very cold-hearted. The way they will discard you, they'll block you, they'll ghost you, they'll do whatever they think they want to do because they're already like kind of dead inside from that standpoint. And the thing is, I've had girls tell me that they're dead inside. I'm like, how many dudes have you fucked? Like, I lost count. I'm like, well, there's your fucking, you bought into this feminism line. Now you're just going to be this jaded bitch for the rest of your life. Because if you're a guy, like for me, I always joke, like I'm like the male. I got alpha widowed myself because I dated a girl who had I was number 3 body count, and she just looked at me like I was the sun, moon, and the stars, and I just got like that pure love. I actually had that with 2 women in my life. And so then when you settle, like when you start dating a chick, and then you start finding out her body count, and then you start putting little 2 and 2 together, like, man, this bitch is just like a selfish, cold-hearted bitch. You're just like. And then if you're a guy like us, you're focusing on money, muscles, game, frame, you are like aware of relationships, and you're aware of like getting better as a man, and you're tolerating the subpar treatment. You're like, no, fuck you.
Yeah. Right. You don't want once you have a girl that has healthy bonding mechanisms, it's like, I don't want to ever not have this.
No, that's
you gotta be kidding me.
That's our version of alpha widow.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. You don't want to go back. That's harder to find that girl nowadays, of course. Well, and so in a study titled "The Effects of Premarital Sexual Promiscuity on Subsequent Marital Sexual Satisfaction," it's a study and paper that was done. They showed that it correlated. It was a 3.9% drop per body. For on a probability of her reporting happiness versus, satisfaction, happiness versus moderate satisfaction to unhappiness.
Do you have a graph you can share? You want to share that?
I don't. I just have the paper I could link and
throw
that in the chat.
The audience can see it as well.
Yeah. So, and I had the paper in my notes, but I didn't so they can look through it. But
no worries.
yeah,
no worries.
here we go. I can still throw it in the chat. I'll throw it in the chat right now.
Okay, cool.
Where to go here? Oh, sorry.
And I want to answer this question. Jawad says, what happens to these types of women who can no longer feel oxytocin? Do they just become leftover women? Well, yeah, one of two things will happen. They will go and they will pair up with some beta that will tolerate their shitty behavior, right? Because guys like, Paul, myself, who have self-respect, dignity, and we've tasted quality relationships before, and we know how to source new women. Guys like us will not tolerate that, right? We just won't. Right. This is just not. Why would we tolerate that? If we're going to be treated lesser than, and just have to deal with this woman's myriad of mental problems that she is responsible for, because at the end of the day, she's an independent human. She has to go through her shit and fix herself. That takes therapy. That takes fucking a lot. And these chicks they pretend like they got their shit together so well on the front end, but I'm telling you, these chicks cry themselves to sleep. They fucking hate the fact that they are the way they are, and it's absolutely detrimental. So they typically will just saddle up with a beta that will tolerate this kind of shitty behavior from them, quite frankly. Yep. And then they'll both kind of be like, she'll kind of resent the guy for not being the guy, and he'll kind of resent her because he's not getting the treatment he believes he deserves, and they'll be in this kind of mediocre relationship.
Mediocre relationship, as they statistically show here. Mm-hmm. And that's where this is where you really end up with the alpha widowing scenario, is that she is settled with the lower guy consciously in order to have more feelings of control in that relationship, because she can control a weaker man versus a stronger guy, right? And she's really just looking for provisioning and safety, and just kind of building, even if it's not a toxic, terrible relationship, it's just a lukewarm relationship. But lukewarm relationships look terrible from the guy perspective. This is the woman who cuts her hair short, gains 30 pounds, and bitches at you to take the trash every day. You know what I mean? That's not a woman who's genuinely desiring her partner in that moment. And guys focus on a reality of alpha widowing. The guys focus, I think Red Pill Space focuses a little too much on that, though, because that stimulates our male anxiety. Some guy had a bigger dick and was better than me in the past, and then they get to feel bad about themselves. That's what guys like to do, right? Find reasons to feel shitty about themselves. Reality, though, is that yes, may be a thing. It's a reality. It's a thing. But a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's just, she's gone through so many varieties of experiences that the intensity that you create as a better man even just isn't enough to override her neurochemical reconditioned system. I'll use a great example from the alpha widowing perspective, how a guy can be alpha widowed by a weaker guy and just have it not be his fault. Yeah. So a great example is when and this is why I rail against this as a thing, when that 14 or 15-year-old girl who's still a child in her brain, but who's reproductively an adult, hooks up with a 28-year-old guy, for example. Now that 28-year-old guy or 25-year-old guy, he might be, by society standards, kind of a douchebag, right? Like he's hooking up with some 15-year-old because he can control her. He can't hook up, he can't get a girl who's 19, you know what I mean? And so that guy could be like a loser playing video games, kind of, not going anywhere in life. But to her 15-year-old brain, the difference between adult and kid makes a huge rift in a power dynamic now. Mm-hmm. So she perceives him in her child brain as him being this very dominant alpha leader version, right, of a partner. So now fast forward, whatever, regardless of her notches, she's 28 years old herself, and she meets a guy who is more dominant and more masculine, more alpha than this partner she had when she was 15. But the problem is now she's an adult male with a compromised ability to have those emotions and the rush of emotions that she needs to get. And as an adult female, she's not the power, this guy's an alpha male, she's here, he's here. The power dynamic is not as wide as it was when she was a child and she was with the less dominant male. So her experience as a 15-year-old girl, in other words, is more extreme and intense for this loser than it is for the better guy, the better option.
Right.
There's a drive towards hypergamy, but it's not like the brain is going, is he 6 feet? The neurological system for a girl is going, is he 6 feet tall? Does he have 6-figure income? Like, it's not doing that. It's just we're dealing with neurological responses and feelings and neurochemicals, And so it's designed to point her towards the best mate, the best genetic option she can get. But often that gets corrupted or polluted depending on her background. So in the example of statutory rape, she can't, she may find herself unable to have an intense enough experience with an adult male to override or offset her alpha widowing that she experienced when she was younger. It's not the guy's fault. There's nothing that guy could do about that. You know what I mean? And that's just an unfortunate consequence. And that's where guys need to make themselves better. You know what I mean? And recognize their faults and stuff, but shaming yourself and trying to stimulate anxiety, and because that stuff never forces a guy to get better. It causes a guy to be very deterministic, like, oh, she had Chad back in the day and I'm, she'll never like me enough. Like, the guys get really deterministic and they don't work on themselves. That's not going to help you as a guy. You need to get better, for you, and you'll be a better, higher SMV for women, but you need to pick the right girl too, because there's no amount of SMV that can undo mental disorder or neurological damage or pair bonding damage. There's nothing that can undo that now.
So you said for each new dick a woman takes, the probability of her being happy in a relationship
is reduced by 3.9%.
3.9%, right?
Right. Yep.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And considering not that it's and consider that only 15% consider themselves happy after 8 years. It doesn't take much to put a girl into a place where she just can't be happy anymore. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. And the thing is, if you ask a woman, do you think it's because you fucked, 50 guys when you're in college years? Do you think that's why you're only moderately happy and your guy never seems to do anything right? She's not going to go, I think that's right. I think it's because of all the dudes I bang. That's why I'm not happy with my partner. She'll never say that.
I just did the numbers. So if a girl, let's just 3.9%, let's round it up. So that's 4%. If she's fucked 50 dudes, 50 times 4 is 200. So she's negative 100% miserable in these relationships.
Yes. Yeah. It's like her probability according to the statistics. Now, is there a possibility? So not to sound like this is where people get, upset about it, because a girl who's already made the mistake, it's like, what am I supposed to do? Kill myself? Like, like, what do I do about this now? And the answer is yes. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Don't do that. So the thing is, though, what we don't know is what level of work and what kind of work. I mean, I have a lot of guesses, and I help people with that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? And coaching sessions, things like that, talking about neurological reconditioning, behavioral reconditioning. But we don't have the data to know, okay, this type of therapy, this type of, hypnosis and mind work, these activities, this is what's going to put your brain on a track to reversing the effects of 50 notches. We don't know that. But in theory, there's some self-work someone could do in order to try to, reverse these effects. The problem is, though, women seem to just think that they can reverse the effects without work. They think that they can I'm just going to be in a long-term relationship, and if I meet the right guy and fall in love, then I'm going to, I'll just be fine and be able to be monogamous. And it's
so funny how as much as they shit talk men, they always think another man is the solution to their problems.
Right. Oh, exactly.
The right guy. Just
find the right guy.
I'm 50 in the hole with 52 is 51. That's going to be the lucky one. So
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem is they go, it's like there can be a chance, and what I think, my personal opinion, there's not the research to back, to say it, but from a personal experience and opinion, is that what reconditions the brain neurologically, just like trauma can, right? In trauma, in one event, trauma can recondition the way that the brain is neurologically processing thing, and that's PTSD from a single event, right? So but what does that require? Intensity. It requires intense experiences over time to override these other experiences. And so this is where being good at sex, good at seduction, good at frame, and creating a highly more intense experience with her and repeating that over and over again can cause a woman to now have the intense experience in bonding chemicals for you,
Right.
even after a past.
Right.
But it's going to depend on the girl and how badly she's damaged. And I can't say for sure it's, we correlate in a study, but when we get to individuals, one individual could have ruined her pair bonding ability after 10 partners, and another could have gone through 20 partners and be okay and be more malleable in terms of her ability to pair bond again. It just depends, if she was doing, how young was she when she started, you know what I mean? How intense were the experiences when she was younger? If some of the girls, not just, for example, were having a train run on her, okay, and that was an intense and not an intense experience in a positive way for her, how are you as a guy now going to recondition her into bonding with you and having intensity? You probably can't. You see what I mean? So
It's the ROI is just not there.
and that's the other part. Is the juice worth the squeeze, or just find another girl who's more capable? And generally speaking, it's infinitely easier to find another girl who's more capable. And it's not to say, I don't want to make guys deterministic over notches, because she'll never tell you the truth anyway. And so guys think, if I can just get her body count, then I just know. Well, the reality is, some girl who says, well, I've only slept with 7 people, she slept with 37 and she lied to you. And then another girl that goes, well, I've slept with, 20, I think maybe 21 guys, and she's telling you the truth. She may actually have more of a capability of bonding with you because she's having an integrity and not lying. and you'll discount her because of a number and go with the other girl who, maybe is a lot more toxic. There's a lot more factors that make a person toxic other than their notches. So you got to look at the whole picture. Notches are just one part of the detail or data point. You know what I mean? We're not saying this to help to have you guys go, what's her body count? I got to find a virgin. We're saying this so that people stop this counter narrative of body count doesn't matter. That's absolute bullshit.
And I was telling Paul behind the scenes when we were in the backstage, like, guys, you just have to trust your instincts. Like, I am instinctually disgusted, like biologically disgusted and repulsed by a chick that has a large body count. I cannot sit there with a smile on my face and be like, this is okay. I don't like the way I feel. And that typically comes about after the relationship is caught. Like, there's a lot of problems being caused in the relationship, because typically if the relationship has no problems, you're not going to be like, yo, like, what the fuck happened to this bitch? Like,
right.
why is this bitch so crazy?
Yep.
But because if you're in a blissful state and you're aware, you're not like a blue pill loser, like you're aware of what's going on in the relationship and you're blissfully engaged in it, then from there you're going to be like, oh, okay, like, no, there's nothing to worry about. But when you see, this is why I talk about the ghost of Dick Miss Past coming back to haunt them. It haunts them through their emotions, it haunts them through their mental state, it haunts them through their behaviors. Nobody, like, no man with self-esteem is going to want to tolerate some selfish, cold-hearted bitch. Like, why the fuck would you tolerate that? And if you do, it eats away at you internally, to the point that you'll either become a shell of yourself or just get so disgusted you'll be like, I'm fucking out. Fuck this bitch. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these guys, you know, maybe fortunately or unfortunately for them, are not as experienced with women as you or I are. So they get involved with a girl with a sordid past. She doesn't usually start acting like shit on day one
Mm-mm.
because she's good at playing the part and enjoying the part in a new relationship. She's done it 77 times now, you know, at age 35 or whatever it is, right? So she's done the newness in the honeymoon phase, and her neural stimulation is towards variety. What stimulates her is a new partner and having that variety in that courting and sort of honeymoon phase of a relationship. So a guy will get in the honeymoon phase with one of these girls and think, man, she's having lots of sex with me. She's having lots of fun. Hey, the other girl only had 4 notches, was a little bit more reserved. She wasn't, you know, throwing herself at me in the same way. She wasn't, you know. So what do you know? I must be alpha. I must be a Chad here because 37 body count woman is showering me with sex and love and telling me my dick is amazing and all this stuff, where 4 body count woman was just a little more reserved in the beginning. So I think I'll take the 37 body count woman and take my chances because I feel better right now. And what ends up happening is when the newness wears off, the dopamine intensity with that high that you're on reduces. And in order to get that back, it requires the bonding chemical and feeling a bond to your partner. So when you crave that dopamine rush again, you turn to your partner and then something new happens. You try something in the bedroom and it has a greater effect. You know, like, hey, we just did something a little bit different in the bedroom with a girl with low notches. 6 months into a relationship has a greater dopamine high for her than I've done butt stuff with 73 men girl. Right? 6 months later, you do something a little different in the relationship. There ain't much of a dopamine high there. She enjoys it at the time and then it's over with. And so that what she has now is less emotional buy-in later in the relationship. What does that translate to? Well, let's look at handling conflict. A big determining factor if your relationship will survive is how you handle conflict and how your partner handles conflict.
Yeah.
She has to be
Conflict,
emotionally
conflict resolution. We need to talk about that because that's another thing, right? The modern woman in general does not know how to deal with conflict in a relationship, nor
right.
does she know how to deal with conflict resolution. Her answer to conflict is to blame and leave.
Yes, right. Then because what has she done the last 78 partners? How many one night stands? How many short term, you know, fuck buddies she's had, right? It's like, well, when there's a friction point, instead of dealing with that friction and that stress with this guy with a disagreement, right? That could be an argument. Let's say there's actually an argument. Instead of dealing with that in a healthy adult manner, she just moves on to the next person,
Right.
right? And she'll do some controlling behaviors to win. And if the guy doesn't comply, then she moves on. He's just not for me. I'll just sleep with somebody else tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, she translates, that's her pattern of behavior now, is to criticize, to be defensive, to look contemptuously at her partner, to stonewall, block communication instead of handling things in a healthy way where she communicates with her partner and is invested emotionally in working stuff out, even when it feels bad in the short term. When she's bonded with a higher amount of oxytocin, she fights through the bad feelings of the argument to try to work it out so she can have the good feelings again with the person she's invested in. The girl who has a lot of notches is not practiced in doing that. So her default behavior is to discard and to treat people like they're disposable.
Yeah.
You know, I've had some actually fairly great partners in the past and relationships with women who were, when I say great, I mean, it's like they were good. They were good to me in the relationship. Like I don't regret those relationships, but their model for handling conflict was horrible. And it was directly related to how they conditioned themselves to treat men over time. And instead of being willing to undo that, they wanted to treat me like I was a disposable partner, which only me as a guy with a lot of options, that just caused me to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do this with you. If you're not going to be healthy, see you later. It causes me to move on. She becomes the disposed partner now. Right. And then what? It's just another disposed of scenario for her that she carries into the next situation.
One of the videos you just put out on your channel, I forget the title, but you said that, the truth of the matter is this: when you guys feel bad about being disposed and stuff like that, you have to realize this woman isn't packing up her bag. She's like, I've learned my lesson and now I'm on to have my perfect relationship. She's going to take her shit to the next relationship and fuck that up too. And it's going to happen again and again and again. People don't change. Majority of people don't change. And if they do change, they get worse. That's the majority of people on this planet.
You never see you can change and you will change, but they don't, because they don't put intentionality and work into it. That's why. So it, just like you said, they stay the same or worse because they don't work at it. And that's what women, they don't, there's minus a smaller percentage, right? Women aren't conditioned to do that. They're not supposed to work at it. They're supposed to be pretty and everyone showers them with compliments. That's what they do.
So, there's just a lot to unpack here, but we're going to dive into this study as well, because there's a link between premarital sex and marital speed. But let me ask you something, because I don't know the answer fully, and I just want to see if you can answer this to me in layman's terms. Yeah.
Yep.
So, what happens to a woman when she sleeps with multiple guys that damages her? Like, what is occurring? What is being chipped away at? Is it the sensitivity of her neural receptors, or what is it exactly?
Yeah. So it's, oh man, I'll use drugs as an example. Not that I'm a big druggie. I can't that much other than psilocybin. But like, there's a reason. Okay, but this is good though. As somebody who's, you've done some drugs in your life, you're not doing heroin for a reason, right?
Right.
Because or methamphetamines or something. The reason is because if you do that, that the high that you get from that is going to be pretty extreme. And then what happens afterwards? You never get to experience that high again unless you do what? More heroin. You get it?
Right.
Well, and so it's kind of like that. It's that her brain, it's not some of these experiences can create a massive amount of high, but it's just that repeating these experiences and the newness of these experiences creates a high that she can't keep up with. And so the high, and I'm not talking about the new partner high of new sex necessarily, although that in theory is also compromised, but I'm talking about the oxytocin, meaning I want this closeness from this person now because we just had this high experience. That's what just starts to get chipped away at, and it ends up just going down. So like the first partner she sleeps with that she really feels love for and all that and feels safe with, it's like, oh my God, I just want to be next to him. I want to smell him. I want to be close to him. And then guy number 35, which is you, ready to wipe her up. Not you, John, but guy in the chat here who's an engineer someplace, and these ships come in, and he finally met the girl who used to be the cheerleader in high school, and now he's going to wipe her up. Okay, well, that guy, she just doesn't have. She wants it. This is the tragedy. She's seeing this guy now who's a good guy, good for her, maybe even good at sex. Maybe it's like not that he's not bad for her, and she wants to have those feelings of wanting to just latch on to him, hold on to him, and never let him go. But that oxytocin is only about mid-level. She just can't feel it. It's just not there. It's dulled or blunted. It's the same thing like when someone does a lot of drugs and they're now just perpetually depressed.
Right.
And they have to like, how do I get that feeling and that drive back? Well, you damage your neurochemical system with drugs, and it's going to take a lot of work to repair that shit now, because the brain, it's the neurons that are fucking not firing and not connecting in the same way anymore. And you have to now work extra hard to undo that. And there's no clear pathway to undo it either. So it's really damaging, and not a lot of, we have things we can think about doing, but it's not a lot of real answers. It's almost like cancer. We got ways to get rid of cancer. We're not super clear on all of it. You know what I mean? Like, so we can do things if we find out it's better not to get cancer, right? To prevent it. Because if you get it, it's like, well, shit, I know these things I can do. It's going to damage me a lot more, be a lot harder on me to try to recover from it almost. But I may not recover. I may still die from cancer. Like, once you're there and you have to recover, a lot harder and a lot less certain than just not getting there to begin with.
Right.
And that's the thing. If women just wouldn't get there to begin with, they would be so much better off. And, to put this, just a short thing, because women always ask, what the fuck's a young girl supposed to do here? I mean, besides not jump on all the dicks in town, but that's a little cavalier, because really even a girl who's been with 50 guys has turned down thousands of guys. So we can't slut shame her that bad. Honestly, if we had the power that some of these women had, our notches, we'd be dead of like 3 different STIs right now, like most of us guys. So they're not terrible people and not selective. They still are more selective. They could be having sex with thousands of guys. And instead, they've only had sex with 50, but 50 is still too many. And what they need to be doing is just being a lot more selective and pursuing long-term success in a relationship with somebody. And that's the determining factor. Is this guy going to be a potential long-term good partner? That's what I want to know before I start sleeping with them. If a girl just does that simple thing and isn't lying to herself in the process, she will keep her notches lower. You know what I mean? I'm not going to have one night stands with a guy I don't know. I'm not going to do, there's a lot of things she won't do that rack a girl's numbers up. And that focuses her towards, all right, this guy is a good long-term mate. That keeps her in relationships longer. And she's conditioning now neurochemically, not just the oxytocin, but the coping behaviors, like the communication and the stuff like that, to stay in a relationship long-term versus practicing short-term strategies and coping behaviors, which is to treat someone as disposable.
Yeah. And that thing, I'll tell you this too, man, just by treating people as they're disposable is just not good for the human soul either.
No,
it's not. You can't just treat people as these disposable objects. And a lot of people, I mean, I think because we live in this, like now we live in like, the social media age where you can talk somebody on your phone.
And you don't get your mouth checked.
Yeah, right. But you can send a text message that's nasty, or send like a unfair text message, then block somebody. But you become so desensitized, you don't realize there's a human being on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And another thing is this too, like, because right, when you are in real life, and it's a sweet moment of justice I've encountered a couple of times. But when you catch one of these people talking shit to you in real life, you're like, oh, hey, hey, man, remember what you said about me? Like, oh, well, listen, dude, I was just joking, bro. But those are too few and far between. Ultimately, there's really not a lot of repercussions for people being like that. Like there's a guy that works for me in Tokyo, and he gets a little catty over the text message. When I talk to him face to face, he's like, "Oh, I was just joking. I was like, "You better be, because I'll feed you your fucking shoes." Right. Yeah. But these people, I mean, women definitely get the free pass, because with beta male fucking gayness at an all-time high, I mean, these dudes are letting these chicks get away with murder. Like you're seeing, like, anytime, I talk about this often, anytime you see a woman like physically whooping a guy's ass and hitting him hard, that started with her being like, well, that's why your brother's better looking than you, on a text message, and the dude not checking her or something like that.
Yeah, right. I mean? Yeah,
and,
right.
And these dudes have no backbones nowadays, and that's why it's getting out of control. Yeah. But let me ask you this. So let's say you're a girl, you're watching, you have like a 70 body count, you're in a relationship with a guy, you're as happy as you can be, but you just kind of have this discontentment, right? That's kind of lingering, causes you to have a wandering eye. Is this a death sentence to girls? Are they inevitably, the average woman, is she inevitably going to start straying, looking outside the relationship, and potentially cheating, or how does that work out in your opinion?
Well, here's my advice to the girl, like into the, and this applies, helps the guys out, because what are you going to look at here, right? We can look at the level of damage and wonder if it's hopeless or not, but how productive is that? In other words, if I get into, let's say I'm walking down the street today and I get creamed by a Ford F-150 and I am physically damaged quite a bit, and it's going to take, I don't know whether I'll ever be right again. And and it's going to take a lot of physical effort to put my body right again. Guess what? I'm fucking doing the work. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm doing it right. I'm doing it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the probability. I'm going for it. They could tell me you have a like 0% chance of living. I'm like, cool. Well, fuck you. I'm going to fix that right now. I'll never stop fighting. And so a girl who's done the 70 body count girl needs to say, I've damaged myself, admit that, and I'm going to put all of my effort into fixing this and making this different. That's your only way out. That's the start. If she doesn't start there, then there is no repairing. There's no fixing it. There's no man that's going to come in and swoop in and be her knight in shining armor, because she's damaged her ability to even have the feelings for the knight in shining armor that she should have the feelings for, right?
Theoretically speaking, would she get worse as time goes on if left untreated?
Yes. And this is why women who are 40 plus years old are unpleasant to be around. Not all of them.
Like Ned's and Sushi on Twitter.
Yes. She's nice to me. I wouldn't date her. That's okay. She's happy with her guy. I don't think she'd date me either. But no, it's like, the reason why a lot of times it can be very unpleasant is because they've had more negative experiences. Some of them not her fault, right? But some of them she was at least her participation. And so she's had more negative experiences, and it has reconditioned her mind into more negative outcomes and less of an ability to bond due to the numerous amounts of experiences. It's not impossible for her. And I say that there are exceptions. I know 40 plus year old women who are hot, take care of themselves, and who would give any 20 something a run for their money. The reason why is because they're smart. They know that they are not going to compete even in their best body with their 21, 22-year-old selves. So if a girl who is just as hot as they were with 21, 22, she'll come in and win in the hotness category. So she knows that I need to bring other things to the table to make a man happy with me, meaning not complicating his life is a simple one. A 21, 22-year-old doesn't have the, self-awareness to not complicate your life a lot of times and to handle her emotions properly. Or 42-year-old woman may be better at that if she's been working on herself. And so that's women get mad because my girlfriend's 25 and, I meet girls when they're 25, and then it doesn't, if it ends, it's usually 5 years later. But so I'm on the DiCaprio program. But women who are like 35, 40 get mad at me, like, why aren't you dating a girl like your own age? I'm happy to date a girl my own age. I don't discount them. But when they show up and they're unpleasant to be around because they've done none of the self work to be a better option for me to offset whatever age related decline they've had in looks, why the fuck would I take that on? Why would I take on a decade more of notches and bullshit and bad experiences from a girl, versus a decade less? It's crazy. Now, again, if the girl works on herself, she'll be a better partner than the younger model. But that's not what they tend to do. And so they end up getting nexted by a guy with options and choices.
Right.
I did spot, a girl in the chat. I don't know what her age is or what her, it was just, but she had said, well, she's been, trying to be relationship focused, but still hasn't found a guy. And I do want to recognize, although I'm going to put the responsibility and onus on her, okay, not on the marketplace, just like I do guys.
This one,
yes.
Danielle?
Yep. Okay. So I put the onus on her, okay, just like when a guy says there's no good women out there, I put the onus on the guy. But I will recognize, yeah, it's hard out there.
It
There's
is.
not, it is. And so there are a lot of guys that are just not fucking good matches.
I always say this, that the good women are just as rare as good men.
Mm-hmm.
If not, I would say, oof, that's actually hard to say. Well, I mean, monetarily speaking, like me and you, we're 1%. We're
Yeah.
literally above the 1%. So
Right.
good luck fucking finding us.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
But then, like, you know, good women too. It's hard. It's hard. And Danielle did say in the chat she's a virgin too. So, and I don't know how old she is, but you know, you can't. It's really just it's a very defeatist thing to go around. And she's not bashing men. She's
No,
cool.
she's not. She's not. I'm not shitting on her.
She's a moderator on Legal Mindsets YouTube.
Oh, okay, cool.
She's a cool girl.
Yeah, sweet.
And so, but the thing is,
how old is she though? What do you think?
I don't know. Let's ask
Danielle,
her.
tell us.
How old are you, sweetheart?
How old are you?
What are you wearing?
Yeah. What are you wearing?
Describe yourself. But you can't, guys too, because I see this happen with a lot of guys like, oh, all women are shit and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, okay, dude, come on the show, turn on the camera. Let's see what you look like. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah. And that's,
I want to talk to myself, bro. I don't want to lose my job at Dairy Queen, you know, like, oh.
Yeah. Right. You know, okay. So Danielle is 36. Damn. Okay.
36.
All right. Yep. And so, well, I don't know her personal history. That would be something that would have, we're not going to do live, obviously, but,
Right.
you know, it's, yeah, there's just, there's got to be something, it's going to boil down to her, you know, sexual market value in general, like, you know, and that plus her, the way she's mate selecting and showing up, you know what I mean? And so that's what it's going to boil down to for her. In other words, how hot is she, you know, and how attractive, and I mean physically, unfortunately, for women, it can be a negative thing that there's a lot put on looks, you know, for her, but you have a large range too, you know what I mean? Like a girl who's, you know, less attractive, maybe genetically, all she has to do is like not be fat, and she still has access to higher value dudes and good dudes. You know what I mean? Like it's amazing. Like it's like the guys who go, oh, I can never be a super Chad with, you know, $1 million and, you know, and whatever, you know, a Ferrari and all the bullshit. That's just the internet. The reality is it's not just be the attractive choice. It's also don't be unattractive. And it's really easy to not be unattractive. Like for a girl, if she's just not fat and takes care of her health, okay, good. She's thin. We got it. You got like 60, 70%. Yeah. Hey, yeah. What are you doing later? No, it's like she's thin. All the guys are like, oh shit, let's hook up with her. Oh my God. I live in Virginia. They're all fat here or something, you know? It's like, you know, so you already did, you know, 65% of the work if you're not fat. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so she can show up and be attractive. Well, then the rest of it has to do with how she's selecting a mate. There's got to be a flaw in the orbit of men she's putting herself around in, and how she's showing up and how she's drawing those guys in and attracting them. And so working on that, and you should, you know, just like I teach pickup for guys, you know, I've had women come to me actually for this. It's just not as many at all, but it's like it's the ability to draw in a high value man is what it boils down to, an attractive man, and have a variety of options. Right.
Right.
And if you find yourself discounting guys, early that would be good choices, then you got to dive into that to find out why that is, because you may be self-sabotaging, you know, and there may be some fears or traumas, you know, don't need to say anything in the chat about this because it's private, but there may be some fears or traumas or issues revolving the sex and sexual, you know, how you view sex and things of that nature. And that could, you know, sabotage your ability to meet an attractive guy and have sex with him, quite frankly. You know, it's not something that, you know, she might want to do, but a girl like Danielle has a hard time. In fact, I've coached a couple of girls now who were 19, 20, 21 when they came to me, who were virgins and wanted to get laid, but they wanted to get laid with the right guy and have it be a long-term guy. And they go out on a date and the guy's like, well, if we're not banging after 3 dates, right? Like he's
Yeah.
following the program, and she's like, because guys are stupid too, right? Like guys, no offense, guys, but we're stupid too, and you guys are stupider than a lot of guys out there. A lot of guys are stupider than other guys. It's like, okay, there's a reason why guys have the 3-date rule, but that rule applies to a girl with 10 bodies or something. If you have a virgin in front of you who says, I haven't had sex yet and I want to have the right partner, don't go, well, I'm not going to spend money on dinner, 3 dates, like you're an idiot. You know what I'm saying? You have to
It's tough.
consider the individual.
And the bottom line is this, like, fat women and sluts have fucked it up for everybody, right? Because sluts have conditioned guys who do get pussy to be like, whoa, what the fuck, bitch? You're not giving me that pussy on the first date, second date, third date? Like, I'm out of here. And then but at the same time, they're caught in this conundrum because they're like, oh,
That's
wait,
a very good point. Yes.
I fucking don't want sluts. So you're not acting like a slut, but it's got, and that's kind of showing like how guys can't really think long term, and how fat women fuck it up is because fat women inflate the egos of 5s and 6s because literally 70% of American women are overweight or obese. 70%. 70. You know what the obesity rate here in Japan is?
Most of them live in Detroit. Let me tell you. No, I'm kidding.
The obesity rate in Japan, 5%.
Yeah.
5% over here. When I go back home to America, I'm like, how are you people alive? Like,
how Japanese women are aliens. They're not human beings.
Korean too.
They got magic looks and metabolism and vaginas,
it's mind-boggling to see it all. But anyways, going back to the point, it is tough out there for girls as well, and it's just it's
hard, dude.
It is tough. And so if you guys are liking this conversation, just so you know, Paul is going to be speaking at the Masculine Empowerment Network. And that's going to be in January. He's going to be giving multiple presentations on frame, dominance, mind control, inner game, you name it. And we're going to take a quick break here to look at that. Go to the masculineempowermentnetwork.com and then get on the waiting list right here, because December 29th is when we open enrollment. And enrollment is available for 5 days. And then once you're enrolled, your position is locked in. Then starting January 9th to January 20th, Monday to Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern and 9 a.m. Eastern, we're going in a group of men, usually 100, 150, 200 men. And there's already 200 members in this year's course as it is. So we're going to have a jam-packed room full of red pill guys who are ready to take their game, Money Muscles game frame, to the next level. Paul, we've been working together since, was it 2020, Paul?
Yeah, I think so.
2020. So we really got the wheels greased on this. We're really good at helping guys out. Paul was part of the Inner Game Healing Summit as well. Paul is seriously, I always tell him behind the scenes, but Paul is like the apex member of Rule Zero. I mean, the guy knows, you're literally a killing machine. You have super level game, super level sex game, super level seduction skills, super level fucking money skills, and super level frame and management skills. I think you're really just undervalued by the internet because people are dumb, but quite frankly. But like, if you guys want to get one-on-one interaction with me, Paul, not to mention Red Pill Thor, and all the guys that have been part of the Masculine Empowerment Network, go now, get on the waiting list, because now what we're going to do is we're going to showcase Paul's talents even more as we're going to review this study that we have right here. And this is the study here. This is available at isstudies.org. Actually, I'll put this in the chat for you guys. This is counterintuitive trends and the link between premarital sex and marital stability. Paul, I'll put this in the chat for you two in the private chat. So if you want to screen share from your side and control and go through it as well, we'll take turns doing that. If you guys have any questions, throw a super chat and we will get to it right away. But we're going to talk about the actual data now, because it was just two of us talking and we had a little bit of data. Again, here, this is what Paul was talking about earlier when he was talking about the study that they did. This is a separate study. He put this in the link in the chat earlier, and this study is the effects of premarital sexual promiscuity on subsequent marital sexual satisfaction. And then right here, in the abstract, it says right here, for every additional person, a woman's chance of happiness in a relationship goes down 3.9%. So basically 4%. So if a woman has sex with 10 men, 40% chance of her happiness permanently is going to go down 40% in that relationship. I don't want those
in our long-term attempt, right? Yeah.
In a long-term attempt, correct. More than 8 years. So that's something that we're going to break down here as well. And again, it's this too, right? Americans in general are probably on the planet the worst at relationships. I gotta say, would you agree with that?
It seems that way. I mean, I would put, I would put Americans in the same category as dudes like British and Canadians as well. Australians probably. I don't see anything better happening over there. So really just your first world westernized, more inclusively woke nations tend to have a harder time, because they don't have, there's traditional values happened over time because it fit in with our instinctual drives. A lot of them. There were like problems and limits, of course, with a lot of the traditional things in a lot of cultures, but for the most part, it worked with how our instincts work. Having a male lead a relationship is instinctually comfortable for most men and women, for example, right? And then with internet and, ideology, the more advanced nations started bagging the traditional, like looking away from those things. And it's okay to challenge your beliefs and stuff, but they started devaluing tradition, and the decades and generations that went into creating these traditions, they devalued them and now tried to do something completely alternative, and it doesn't fit with how we were instinctually driven and stuff like that. So we're trying to run relationships really based on an economic model and what's better for the economy versus how we are wired instinctually. So we find ourselves spending more money and not happy. A guy is divorced 3 times and has kids with different babies' mamas and had to move and, lose all his crap and buy new crap. That guy spends more money in the economy and is more of a wage slave than a man who stays single his whole life or gets married to one woman and has a couple kids, for example, right? And so we're not doing what's an advantage for us personally based on the way our biology is. We're doing to what's an advantage of the economy that, is for money and advancement for other people, not for ourselves. And so that's, I would say, why that is, why we run into this.
I also think from just a more of a eagle eye approach, I do think that the media it's kind of become this, not like the traditional media like CNN and all that shit, but I mean like, music has become, all music is about is relationship turmoil and doing drugs.
Right.
That's really everything it is. Like Drake is, people say Drake's the greatest rapper of all time. Like, dude, Drake is a fucking pussy. Like his shit that he raps.
I like his music and he's pussy. You know what I mean?
Some of his music is good, but dude, the majority of his music, baby, I miss you.
Yeah. That stuff I don't like.
And people are like, oh yeah, well Drake gets bitches. I don't give a fuck about Drake getting bitches. I care about the health of the fucking country, and that shit does have an effect on you, whether you want to say it does or doesn't. And there has been a simping epidemic, and it's not a coincidence that you have this kind of simpy ass music going on 24/7, plus women with their super toxic music. Well, your man ate me out and I'm a fucking this, I'm a boss bitch and I'm gonna get some dick, and just like trashy shit, really just ghetto trashy shit. And you have every woman like singing, like, for example, Cardi B and Wet Ass Pussy song, right? That went viral, and that is just like, if I see a woman enjoying that song, I'm like, oh God, go back to the fucking sewers. Like, I really like, I just can't do it with trashy women, Paul. I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot. If a woman's trashy, if she has no manners, if she's not demure, if she doesn't have class about her, I'm just like, you're just gross. Like, you can't, you can't sit with us. Like, you can't be with us here at this party. And those are my standards. And I feel like that's just, as a man, your woman is a direct representation of you. And if you're a man who carries yourself with self-respect and dignity, and you want to be a guy that is respected amongst your peers, you can't be around with a girl who's like a trashy whore, or even like former whore, and people know about it. It's just, it is going to look bad upon you no matter what you say. Like, no matter what, people really can't respect Kanye West for being in the situation he's in right now because you married a fucking whore.
Yeah.
And you gave her kids. And now everybody's like, oh my God, shocker alert. She divorced him. And now he's paying her $200,000 a month in child support.
Insanity. Yeah.
Truly insane. Truly,
Right.
truly insane. So
Right.
that being said, we're going to cover this this article here. Do you have anything you want to add to that before?
No, not really. That's pretty good.
I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Actually, no, I know I'm right.
That's right.
Let's start off with the topic here. It says American sexual behavior is very different than it used to be, right? That's why Thor, Wraith, and all this stuff, older guys in the Masculine Empowerment Network, like, no, this shit didn't used to be this bad. Especially Mark Daniels from Mark's Inspiration. I believe he's 62, and he's saying the same situation.
Yeah.
Today,
it's even different for me, but I'm not young anymore. I'm 45, so I do remember I watched a transition.
Me too. I'm 37, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I remember when girls were like, I think shit got really bad once Obama took office, and not to blame it on him, but that's when that mass liberalization of the country happened, and everybody just wanted to be cool. Like, oh, we got to vote in a black president. Oh my God. Right. But they really didn't realize they were bringing in like communism and this liberalism that has rotted the whole core of America. I remember I slept with this one chick, and this was in 2010, and like we had sex. She was tutoring me in chemistry, and we had sex. And then after we were done, she like cried a little bit. She's like, I feel like such a slut. Like, you're not my boyfriend. This is the first time I've ever done this. And like, she had like a legitimate freak out about feeling like she's a slut. Now I like fuck a girl after I meet her 30 minutes. She doesn't even ask me if I want to use a condom.
Yeah.
Times have definitely changed big time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And Jordan Peterson,
a whole phase is normalized now. That was not a normalized thing 20 years ago.
It's disgusting. Even Jordan Peterson was just on Sky News, and he talked about how women who are addicted to, you would actually love this. Actually, I'll pull up the clip a little bit later.
Yeah.
But women who are addicted to social media, namely Instagram, exhibit psychopathy and heavily narcissistic traits. Women more than men. And it dawned upon me right now. They also treat people as if they're disposable.
Right. Because they're just clicking them off on the internet. And there's so many of them that are flooding their inboxes. So it makes sense.
So let's go back to here. Today, most Americans think premarital sex is okay and will have 3 or more sexual partners before marrying. What, if anything, does premarital sex have to do with marital stability? And this article was written in 2016. This research brief shows that relationship between divorce and the number of sexual partners women have prior to marriage is complex. I explore this relationship using data from the 3 most recent waves of the National Survey of Family Growth collected in 2002, 2006 to 2010, and then 2011 to 2013. For women marrying since the start of the new millennium, women with 10 or more partners were the most likely to divorce, but this only became true in recent years. Women with 3 to 9 partners were less likely to divorce than women with 2 partners, and women with 0 to 1 partners were the least likely to divorce. So, I mean, that in itself right there is already telling something telling quite the story at the beginning of this article. Earlier research found that having multiple sex partners prior to marriage could lead to less happy marriages. I'm actually opening that for later. And often increase the odds of divorce. But sexual attitudes and behaviors continue to change in America, and some of the strongest predictors of divorce in the years gone by no longer matter as much as they once did. In my 2005 books, Understanding the Divorce Cycle, I showed the transmission of divorce between generations became weaker as divorce grew more common. Could the same thing have happened with sexual behavior? Somewhat surprisingly, the answer appears to be no. Even more noteworthy has been the decline in the proportion of women who get married having had only one sex partner, in most cases, their future husbands. And that's how it used to be. 43% of women just had one premarital sex partner in the 70s. By the by the aughts, this was down 21%. Neither of these two trends changed much after the first decade of the 21st century. Following in the wake of the sexual revolution, the 1970s have been characterized as a decade of carnal exploration. But this doesn't seem to have been the case for the vast majority of women who ultimately tied the knot in that decade. Almost 2/3 of them had at most one sex partner prior to getting married. Even in the 1980s, slightly over half of women had a maximum of one sex partner before walking down the aisle. Things looked very different at the start of the new millennium. So, this table here is a distribution of women's premarital sex partners by marriage cohort, right? So, looking pretty bad. In the 70s, looks like 21% were virgins, right? One partner was 43% women. Two partners before she getting married was 16, 3, 8, 6, 4, and 2% had 10 plus partners. And in the 80s, we see a pretty large jump in the upper numbers, quite frankly. Looks like they're kind of getting it in more. Sample size is a little bit larger, but as you can see, as the years progress, the number of virgins in 2010 is actually 5% right there. So shout out to Danielle in the chat.
Yeah.
One partner, 22%.
That makes her so valuable, really.
It really does. It really, really does.
Right.
Two partners, 12%. Three partners, 11%. 4 to 5 partners, 18%. 6 to 9 partners, 14%. And then 10 plus partners, 18%. So that number is obviously keep on growing. And right now, good Lord, have mercy. Who even knows what's going on?
Well, and this is the only thing that makes some of these. This is not the only study like this. This has been repeated numerous times with similar results, but they don't take it past 18, 10, and one had taken it up to 13 or 16. It's like they don't even take it past to where these are rookie numbers by today's standards. And there's the academic world seems to look like they shy away from wanting to do these studies because they'll be shamed and their careers will be in jeopardy when they demonstrate an unfavorable view of women, and it's not in a female behavior. It's not like an unfavorable view of women, really, because women who don't rack up the notches and partners, they're not having as unfavorable results. You know what I'm saying? So it's not, the data is the data. It's not sexist, but women want to be able to maximize their hypergamous mating opportunity. In other words, a woman doesn't want to be told you can't discard a man and fuck another guy. Like they don't want to be told that and told that there's consequences for that. And so it's become a taboo topic in the academic world to talk about the effects of notches. So there aren't very many further studies. There's one by a mattress company or something, which found funny that a mattress company would do the study, but with their test sample, they found the average to be 19 sex partners by a certain age.
How did they derive that data?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I don't have it in front of me, but that was just one I saw which showed a higher number. But it seems it stands to reason. Here's the way I look at it and how the study would have to be designed if I were the researcher, is I would have to correct for what we could call the female incel population to get an accurate number. Because we could consider women who have mental disorders, right? Who don't, have really sex partners, more incels. Women who are greatly obese or physical problems or ailments or social problems. There's a category of women like that might take out, 10 or 15% of women that would, and that 10 or 15% will skew the stats. So basically we got to look at let's say SMV 3, right? To 10, right? Not the ones who aren't having sex at all because they're not in the marketplace. We want to look at who's in the marketplace, who's open and out there to having sex. How many notches are they racking up? Not some girl who's got some health issue and is bedridden. You know what I mean? She doesn't count in the statistic. So we got to adjust for, maybe start at notch 1. You know what I mean? Meaning that, okay, she's capable of going out there and having sex. And then we look at that data and we look at it over time. So in other words, let's look at by epiphany age. So by 30 is the midlife crisis for women. That's, when women start to approach 30, they start to transition their mindset from short-term mating and having fun and exploring herself and all that stuff into being more commitment minded. So let's cut it off at either 28 or 30 years old and say that's how many notches has she racked up by the time she's decided to become commitment minded. And we could say reasonably, let's say that's 28 years old. So from start to finish, what are we looking at? And I think I'm going to give a very wide standard deviation because the studies aren't there, but we can look at a lot of anecdotal evidence because I'm dating women in their 20s and my clients are, and we see what the results are. We see that commonly a woman in her 20s has gone through anywhere between like 15, maybe about 20 notches. If she's 30 years old, she's gone through like 20, anywhere between 20 and 50 bodies.
Right.
So like the average woman in the West doesn't even fit this paper because her notches are even higher. So like her statistical, if we follow this model, what point, what point do these statistics change for her, right? I mean, if it is a consistent statistic into her being less capable for relationship happiness, most this correlates to the damning hard to swallow pill is that means that most girls who are 30 this year are not commitment capable.
Right.
That's the reality of it. They've gone through
said, like the ability for them to be in like not even like I need you to show up and like play a harp and be like dressed like a fucking Victoria's Secret agent, like just be normal.
How about say I'm sorry if you fuck up?
Right. Say I'm sorry. Wow.
And mean it. How about not criticize your man in public? Yeah. Like, I mean, we start saying things and guys who are in that blue pilled world are like, holy shit, that's asking too much. You know what I mean? Well, what if she's in a mood? You know what I mean? Like, what? Like if I'm in a mood, I can't look at my girl and be like, you dumb fucking bitch, like at church or something, like, or in public. I mean, that's horrifying, right? Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't do that, of course. So why would the woman be able to do the female equivalent of that? Do you know what I mean? The roll her eyes and look at you, or just like, oh, well, say something disparaging to other people, joke about how you guys aren't having, good sex. Things shit that women do nowadays. It's like fucking insane.
It blows my mind how they just can't say sorry.
That one, yeah. Personal accountability.
Let me ask you this. Now, do they not say sorry because they are unaware? Or are they just vindictive?
They're devils. No, it's the reason is there is an awareness issue. We'll put it like that, because, and there's a drive. The drive is to not be the good, or not to be not the bad chimpanzee and to be the good chimpanzee. So when I say chimpanzee, I'm talking about our mammalian brains here. Okay. Right. So our mammalian brain, not the human part of our brains, drives us to certain things. We can simplify it by saying men want to be the useful chimpanzee. Right. We want to be useful. Right. We can be the asshole if we're valuable to the team.
Right.
And we're cool with that as men. That's not
it's like the degenerate sales guy. Like, oh, this guy's fucking drunk. He's showing up late. He grabbed the girl's ass in the water room, but he closed $250,000 deals last month. Like,
yes, right. Exactly. There you go. I hate that guy, but he's still hired.
Todd, look, we love you. Like, God, just don't do coke in the bathroom anymore. Please, just do it at home. Like, we like you,
Yeah, exactly.
Usefulness is there. The utility, right?
Yes. Yep. Because we were the ones who brought in the resources and provided protection. That was our main role. And so men need to feel useful. Women need to feel good. Like they're the good person, the good, valuable person, because they were managing the social relationships in the tribe and in the camp, as well as utilizing the resources the most efficiently. It's not that women don't want to have utility or usefulness. It's that the usefulness is what helps them make them a good woman, right? It's so the motivator is to be seen as good. So if she says I'm wrong and I'm sorry, that signifies that maybe she's not a good chimpanzee. And so
Mhm.
there's a revolt, or there's a resistance to wanting to admit fault and take personal responsibility and to put responsibility on everybody else. I don't blame them or shame them for that instinctual drive, because shit, in our more savage times, a woman does something bad and wrong and goes, I did it, I'm sorry, burn her, she's a witch, throw stones at her face. Like, I mean, being the weaker sex, she was more, prone to having violence put against her for making mistakes, which certainly makes somebody not want to take accountability. And so, that makes sense while they're driven that way. But just because we're driven a certain way, that doesn't mean we fall to our instinct as a main strategy. We have a human brain that allows us to thrive for a reason. I'm more driven as a man, for example, to use coercion and violence to get shit I want. That doesn't mean I go around beating up people and taking their lunch money, right? Like,
Right.
so we don't default to our instincts. We just need to understand them so we can steer them in the right direction. And that's the thing about women. They need to understand, like, hey, you're a valuable, we're not in, 1,000 years BC where admitting a fault means that you're going to get stoned to death. You're safe in this relationship to admit fault, and I'll value you more as a woman when you do that. And that's up to that's why the guy needs to have good relationship
Mhm.
frame when he's with a woman, to create that environment where she can admit fault and not feel like, I'm going to get fucking ostracized here. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you reduce that danger for her,
I,
you
you
know?
know, I took one of, like they said, the good girl ex that I had, right? So one
Mm,
time she and I had like a little bit of a text message fight, and I was just like, 'cause I was just like, and we were doing long distance, right? Because she
yeah.
lived like in the countryside of Japan with her parents, like literally in the middle of a rice field. And one time we had a fight, and I was like, I felt like a dick doing this, but I had to hold my ground. I was like, all right, you pissed me off. Don't fucking text me. Give me some time, and definitely don't fucking come to Tokyo, because when she did something and she knew she was in the wrong, she would get on a fucking train, a bullet train, and come 3 hours. Like, she would spend 3 hours on the bullet train, show up at the front door, and be like, I'm sorry, but I told her don't come this one time. And I was like, I'm sorry, I fucking told you don't come. Go home. And, because I just got to hold my frame. And,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to allow these little things. And she was like, I'm so sorry. Then she went to like the little store. She put a bag of sodas or whatever, left it on my door, and went back to the countryside. But after she did that, and after, because I had to hold my ground because it's part of the frame, after that, my respect for her went through the roof because she showed that level of remorse for what she did, regardless of her violating my frame. And I
Yep.
still upheld my end of the frame. And I said to her, I said, I told you don't come here. This is not a relationship where you're just going to walk all over me. So you need to fucking go home, and I'll see you when I see you. And but like I said, those things, they matter because, guys, a lot of men nowadays, when it comes to relationships, namely having a strong frame, they cannot bring themselves to ask to have their needs met in the relationship. You know,
Hmm.
they if their frame is violated, they are like tolerated, or they rationalize the woman's poor behavior.
Right. Which means
And
they're not in the frame. They're not in charge of the frame of the relationship now. She is.
right,
Right.
exactly. So I'm gonna kind of highlight some more of these. Are you doing good on time?
Yeah.
Okay. This guy is just cope level 9,000. This guy, here's the attention you ordered, buddy. He's like, these studies are fake. What women did they ask from aware? How do you know if the women told the truth if they're such 304s? Listen, Davin, this one's for you, buddy.
Shut up, bitch.
All right, that's the new one.
I mean, the reality is, like, I'm looking at, I have, let me
It's a
count in
numerous amount of
my,
studies here.
right. Like, I have, let me go to my other screen here. Links to, oh my God, it's so many. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. I'm counting out my links, 29 and 30. So I have 30 links to actual studies. It happened to be an even number 30, which is a coincidence, but 30 actual study links of different aspects of this that when you put it together, it points to, well, pair bonding by definition, because I know there's some guys out there that I even like in the space that are like, pair bonding is not real. I'm like, I think they don't understand the definition of pair bonding.
You
All
have
pair bond.
You have a degree in psych, right?
Yeah, I do, and I'm not a doctor though.
No, I
never
have
finished
a
that.
bachelor's in science and psychology as well. I'm actually trained in this, like you are.
Yes, right. And so pair bonding is just the term, which is kind of I don't like the term myself, but it's the one they use in the research, and it means preferring another person as a mate, if that's their mate preference. And so it's preferring that mate over other options for mating. That's what pair bonding means. So it means you're bonded to this person versus, and you would choose that person as a mate versus making other random choices for mates. That's what that means. Do you know what I mean? And so that's, how can you say that's not real? Of course it's real. And there's a neurochemical component to it that we've measured. Yeah. And we have 30 studies here that point to the neurochemistry behind it and some stuff that we can measure neurochemistry in monogamous species. I'll say monogamous pair bonded species, because monogamy, if that bonding, person they're bonded to dies, they can mate with other people, but you know what I mean? Or not other people, other whatever animals, you get it. But, it's just the research is there. The correlations between relationship satisfaction, cheating, and breakups and divorce with notches has been done repeatedly over and over again by different groups. Because someone will tell you that, well, the IF Institute is, biased, but it's like, okay, then pick one of these other journals. You know what I mean? Because it's been, people said, oh, they're biased. And then they, in a more liberal, woke, journals and stuff more, they've done, they get the same results. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the research is there, man. If you don't want to look at it, you don't want to recognize it, I don't know what to tell you. I will do this. There's a decent article to sum up a bunch of research, and
it's okay. Well, I mean, you could post that article. I'm just going to
post in the chat.
Yeah, I want to go through this one.
It's real.
Davin, you can read that if you do know how to read. Let's continue here, because I'm going to talk about there's a relationship between obviously, shocker alert, the divorce is also correlated to this. So it says, be that as it may, this prediction is only partially borne by the data shown in Figure 1. The following chart depicts the percentage of first marriages ending in divorce within 5 years of wedlock, according to the decade the wedding took place, and how many sex partners a woman had prior to marriage. Consistent with prior research, those with fewer sex partners were less likely to divorce. And what is the number one reason women say they get a divorce for, right? They're not happy. They're not. It's not like the guy's like waking up and like throwing them through the coffee table. They're just not happy. However, there are considerable differences by marriage cohort, and cohort is a group of people, just so you guys know. Okay. For all three cohorts, which is groups of people, women who married as virgins had the lowest divorce rates by far. So the cohort, the group of women who were married as virgins, they had the lowest divorce rates. 11% of virgin marriages, on the part of the woman at least, in the 1980s dissolved within 5 years. The number fell to 8% in the 1990s, and then fell again to 6% in the 2000s. Okay. So that's pretty interesting, because as I think now I'm just going to armchair psychology this. I think it's this. Guys are aware, like when you have a good girl with a low body count, like you just can't go out and find that again. Like it's extremely rare. So I think the reason that these divorces are dropping with virgin women. This is just my analysis, obviously. But it's because the guys kind of realize, like, oh, wait, like my woman's actually fucking pretty good. And they're like seeing all these other chaotic relationships, because people who are happy in relationships and happy in their marriages, they're not on red pill YouTube.
Right. Yeah. They're just they're following what, makes them the most comfortable. And you have to be uncomfortable to go, shit, I better look at some answers here on YouTube to figure out how to get this girl to not break up with me. Well, here's another thing too to throw out there is that there are less, we'll say, forced marriages or forced relationships. There's almost none of those now. Whereas prior to the global sexual marketplace, and I say global sexual marketplace, meaning that women have global choices now based on the internet. That's a new thing that only really happened with the introduction of social media and prevalence of that started with MySpace and dating apps. And then of course increased to what we have now in the early 2000s. Right. So we've been less than 20 years. Right. Data gathered before that, women were not in the global sexual marketplace. So their choices could have been 6 bachelors in their coal mining town or something. And so with that, there were almost more or less forced marriages in a sense. Even in a modern society, I better marry this guy, even though I'm only 18, 19, 20, and not sleep around or give my sex up because I need to make myself more marriageable for this guy because I don't have any other choices. I'm attracted to one man in this town, and there's 3 of us women that want him. So I better make myself available and be willing to, wife him up, get wifed up and have kids early. And so you had more younger marriages, and which nowadays a younger marriage correlates higher to divorce. Right. But back then that there wasn't the choices. And then of course you go into societies where marriage was, more or less you had dowries and families and, more arranged, we'll call it, right? So women just got married younger and were told not to have sex until that happened. Well, nowadays women can freely marry or not marry, have sex or not have sex. So given that freedom, you have a lot less virgins now. So with the virgins that you do have, you're going to see when they do decide to marry, they're not forced into that marriage or feeling forced. So now they bring a lot more healthy stuff. Whereas a girl who felt like she was forced to be married at 18 might be a lot less healthier later on, right? And stuff. And, so that would probably be why I think it's, we see that data.
I think it's a good way to look at it from the woman's side as well. I want to continue with this, and then what I'm going to do, because there's a little bit of this, but I queued up the Jordan Peterson thing, talking about women, Instagram, psychopathy, and then how women's access to internet has really amplified their whoredom, right? Yeah. No, like in every sense of the word, it really 100%. Like these girls. I have been in relationships with girls, and after we had a banging first date, we had good chemistry, and these girls have told me, like, there's this one, I mean, everybody knows the crazy Chinese chick, right? You know about her. So the really crazy Chinese chick, I dated her for, how long did I date her? I dated her for a year and 3 months, right? And when she first met me, we kicked it off really well. We had great chemistry. The sex was phenomenal. And we were having a good time, but she was still so used to like just consistently sourcing men and stuff that she actually went after she met me and she like slept with 2 other guys. Like, and I was sleeping with other girls at the same time too. And when a normal girl meets a guy and is like happily attached to that guy, her instincts are like, I'm just going to stick with this guy. But typically they get influenced by their friends, or they're just used to engaging in this whoredom that they continue to swipe on apps and Bumble and Tinder just out of dopamine addiction due to, like I said, this access. Before that wasn't there. You have a singles bar in your pocket at all times, 24/7, 365. And the temptation is there. And again, when they've been feeding into these behaviors of whoredom, which is when I have problem in the relationship, when there's something wrong in the relationship, when there's conflict, I do not resolve the conflict. I blame the other party, and then I fucking go find a new dick. And then, the problem's not me. It's just I haven't found the right guy yet. And here I am 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 dicks deep,
Yeah.
Littered with mental diseases, no accountability, no self-awareness.
Right.
And this is why a lot of these chicks are alcoholics. This is why female suicide's going up. This is why STDs are through the roof. This is why they're abusing prescription drugs. I mean, it's just clearly a problem in the modern era that there really has, because there's been no safeguards for this. But I think people are slowly kind of waking up. I do think people are slowly kind of waking up. I think girls are kind of tired of hoeing right now. I
There
think they
is
are.
definitely a re-emergence, or at least a smaller target group of girls who are recognizing. That's how I ended up with them in consults, and I'm expensive to talk to in a consult. So, I mean, for a 19-year-old girl to pay for a consult with me, it's like she is very, very bought into getting what she wants and wants answers badly, and she knows that the pathway that her friends are on is a pathway to destruction. She knows that there's now an emergence of a smaller percentage of girls who are recognizing that, because the church is failing now too.
Yeah.
The church, I'm going to say this right now, the church has failed women in the promiscuity department.
Yeah.
And they've done this because by promoting the idea that God will forgive, which I'm not saying you shouldn't promote that idea. That's their idea. Will forgive you for all your sins and choices. They push that without recognizing that there are still physical and behavioral consequences for the behavior. It doesn't, God forgiving you is great. Like if you murder someone and God forgives you, great, but there's still a dead person. Right. And so if you run, so girls, even in churches now, they don't reason this out necessarily and say, well, I'm going to run through 50 guys because I'll just have Jesus forgive me. They don't say that, but that's the message, because there's nothing that makes that blue-pilled preacher more happy than the tout around a pretty tradcon girl who used to be a whore. You know what I mean? Secretly, that guy would love to have her in the hotel room. You know what I mean? And so he carts her around as an example of Christ. You know what I mean? Because she went from her whoredom and came back to the church. And then girls see that and go, oh, so I can go do whoredom and come back to the church. And then I'll find a nice, conservative man to take care of me. And they're right. They can do that 100%. But here's the problem. They're not going to feel it. They're not going to have the feelings they should have. They're broken inside. They can get the justice that some of the dudes on the internet are looking for has nothing to do with the outside results. A girl can do porn and run through a million dudes. And if she stays hot, even remotely hot, she'll get a high value guy that'll take care of her, who just isn't smart enough to recognize the difference between genuine desire and not.
Yep.
The problem where she runs into the problem is on the inside. She's broken on the inside. The consequences that get, person who realizes those consequences is the man.
Right.
And any children he has with her, when she's broken on the inside, isn't feeling it, isn't treating him the way that she should, and exiting the relationship in 7 to 10 years, after a couple kids.
And it's funny, if you're socially dialed in enough too, which you are, let me just show you this, because I've been talking about this for a while, and I think we talked about it in Rule Zero, right? How in the Rule Zero chat, how we were like, okay, dude, Mia Khalifa's boyfriend, this is, or not, she got married, this is only temporary. So
we predicted this a long time ago.
I could see it on this guy's face that this guy
sure.
Do you know who this guy is?
He's is that Riley Reid's guy? Yeah. Oh yeah. And I know, I just laughed as soon as I saw the photos that people were circulating around of their happy marriage on the surface. I looked at him and went, okay, and just smiled. It's not. Here's the thing. I want him and Riley Reid to be successful, be happy.
Yep.
But I know if they're going to be happy, they have to do it in a completely alternate way. And it's just not going to be the way that most women would envision that they would want. He is her buddy.
Yeah.
He is her girlfriend.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And because she can't bond through sex now.
Right.
It's not a bonding mechanism for her. So he's like the best friend, you know, he's the comfort guy.
He looks more happy in the relationship than she does. And like every
100%. 100%. And it's, I hate to judge other people's stuff, but yeah, like he is going, this is his mommy. That's his mommy issues, mommy, you know, and she's the dominant in that relationship for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that what she would really want and gravitate towards, you know?
No, of course not.
Of course
right?
not.
I mean, like I said, some of the telltale signs, like I see are, God, I hope this doesn't get struck down. Like, you know, here's an example, right? The guy looking at her looking at the picture.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
absolutely
stuff like that, little things like that. But yeah, that's just one guy.
Well, yeah, she's e-thoughting it with, you know, her kid and her husband as a marketing tool. I mean, that's not something that most women who feel bonded to, you know, their partners are going to do. And I know I'm being a little judgy here. I try not to be judgy, not because I don't give a shit. I'll be a savage all day, but I don't want people to think like I'm removing my objectivity over judgment. I'm not doing that. It's just, I know based on being socially aware and being a body language expert, quite frankly, looking at those things going, this is not the genuine burning desire that most men would want. And the reason why that guy accepts it is because he doesn't know the difference and he wants a mommy. And I know it's insulting to that guy, and I don't mean to sound that way, but it is what it is.
I mean, it sounds like it's insulting because it's painfully true. Like,
right.
And I can see the guy is a doofus. Like every time he's done doing his flips and stuff, he's like falling on the floor, laughing like a jolly idiot.
Yeah, he's a big kid who wants mommy.
And another thing to top it off, like any guy with not even to say this is not a red pill, blue pill conversation, but any man, right, who has just kind of even purple pill common sense about him knows like, marrying a like a fucking porn star, like I get if you're gonna have a fling, use her for clout, maybe do some OnlyFans collaborations, get a couple hundred G's under your belt, sure.
Yeah.
But to put a child in her and to risk all your assets.
Oh, sure. Well, it's and so what happens with a lot of guys like this, I'll refer to very searchable, because one of my very few videos that was a longer form too, that did like 80,000, views or something. And I'm like shadow banned, so that's pretty good. But it's on cuck psychology. So So it's just to summarize that for the audience here, it's the we look for mating strategies that we believe will work. So for example, women want a guy that's everything, the alpha that takes care of them. But in absence of being able to do that, they'll settle for the security guy and then have at least sex fantasies about the alpha, if not cheat, right? And their mating strategy gets split into a dualistic one, which, Rollo calls the alpha lays, beta pays, right? And rational male for those guys, but that's been established prior to rational male as strategic pluralism and evolutionary psychology. So that's an example. In absence of getting everything you want, you defer to the next option or the next option. When guys don't feel subjectively like they're the alpha male, that they could have an abundance of women, or at least the pure desire of one woman in this case that would protect his children, they default to lower, more beta male strategies. One of them is to allow or even eroticize the anxiety and threat that they feel knowing she's sleeping with a more powerful man. And so you see these weaker guys will have this is guys who get into like the kink of being humiliated and shamed and stuff like that. It's like, because what's happening is there's an intense feeling of shame and anxiety and feeling inadequate, right? Like nothing makes you feel worse more intensely as a man than inadequacy. Because remember, we want to be useful chimps, right? So being inadequate is the opposite of usefulness. So when you feel inadequate as a man, it is like a ripping apart of your insides. It's an existential threat. So they take that inadequacy and they pair it with feelings of erotic feelings, which makes it an intensely erotic experience for them to feel inadequate. And so when she goes and runs off and takes a bunch of, bigger dicks from alphas, you know what I mean, situation, or she's had those porns and all that, he is probably eroticized that and that inadequacy and feels, that, but you know what? That puts you in a very subservient. I mean, like that makes you want to barf. I can see you in the, you're just like, bleh, like, that's revolting to any guy with any that's more or less a dominant male. That's like absolutely revolting.
Dignity. A man with dignity.
Right. Well, you've traded that. Guys like that have traded their dignity. They say, well, I know I can't have my dignity because I am inadequate. They've said I'm inadequate. I'm going to accept inadequacy. And so in order to have sex with this hotter girl, I'll eroticize it and at least feel good about my inadequacy. That's what cuck psychology is from the guy's perspective. But it's disgusting.
Let me catch up with this. Go back to this thing with the things of the correlation between low body count and divorce. So going back to the cohorts here, for all 3 decades, the women with the second lowest 5-year divorce rates are those who only had one partner prior to marriage, right? So that 3.9% goes quite a while. It's reasonable to assume that these partners reflected women's eventual husbands. Even so, premarital sex with one partner substantially increases the odds of divorce. In the 1980s and 1990s, the highest 5-year divorce rates were reserved for women who had 2 partners. The effect was particularly strong in the 1980s when these women had divorce rates of 28%, substantially higher than those of her peers who had 10 or more sex partners to marriage, which is 18%. Even in the aughts, women...
explain that one. Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of people are confused by this stat. They're not recognizing, first of all, look at the years, 1980s, 1990s. So this is pre-global sexual marketplace.
Right.
So this is pre-having an internet full of options, right? And so with that, when a woman would abstain, would only have sex with one man, that was the guy she stayed with, she didn't know what she wasn't experiencing, right? She doesn't know what other dicks are like. She might wonder occasionally, but it never goes far. So her hypergamous best is that guy because there's nobody else. Once she has sex with another person, the possibility is a lot greater that she's not settling with the person who gave her the most intense emotions. So let's say she has 2 or 3 bodies, right? Well, one of those other guys she's no longer with gave her the most intense emotions. So now we have the alpha widowing scenario entering into the picture. They're able to pair bond, but the other guy that got away was a more serious experience for her. So now she is able, and by having experienced now more than one partner, it opens her eyes and options to wait. There's better out here because I have one guy and I have another guy, and this guy was better at sex than this guy. Even if she is married to the better version, well, after only having 2 guys, when she starts to question things, because hypergamy causes that questioning, right? Well, what if the 3rd guy is even better? Or what if the 4th guy? You see what I mean? And so she doesn't have enough notches to recognize that when you have a valuable person you're bonding to, you have to cherish that. You can't just hedge your bets and go elsewhere because you're probably going to be wrong, right? She doesn't know that yet after just 2 notches. She thinks maybe 3 or 4, it's just going to keep getting better. And what happens is it keeps getting worse because their neurological system is being compromised. A girl who's at 9 or 10 notches goes, holy shit, I've had a lot of bad experiences and I've been a little damaged from this. Oh my God, I found a guy that I like. I'm sticking with this guy. Yeah. And so
it's like you're chasing the dragon.
Yes, it's chasing the dragon. And the girl who gets 8, 9 or 10 goes, okay, I see the game here. I need to find the good dude, the best I can find and settle in because I'm going to keep fucking myself up if I keep going. But with the global sexual marketplace, that shifted into having so many options that their hypergamy is now on overdrive. So they go through 10 options and they're like, I wonder what 20 feels like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're always looking at the grass is greener because Instagram says the grass is always greener. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's where we see this shift in the statistics.
And it makes perfect sense too, because it's very interesting. This is correlated to a lot of things. There's a book I read recently. It's called The Psychology of Money, right? And it says like the number one thing that causes people the most financial detriment is not knowing when to say enough is enough and walk away. How many people in the recent cryptocurrency bull market held on to their bags and held on to their delusion? Like, no, it's gonna go back up. It's gonna go back up. Just keep buying more. Keep buying more. No cash out strategy. No saying, hey, enough's enough. Right? A lot of people who went to jail, the Exxon scandal, the Enron scandal, the dude who killed himself, the Victoria's Secret founder, he sold Victoria's Secret for $4 million in I think it was the 90s.
Yeah.
Maybe I think it was 90s. Worst case scenario, early 2000s. He sold for $4 million. Now, $4 million in early 2000s, 90s, that's a lot of money. But he killed himself the next year when Victoria's Secret was resold for $20 million.
Yeah, because it's just like $4 million is not enough for you, bro. Like you can't reinvest that into another business and
you can't make another win again. Exactly. And so that seems to be the situation with women. And there's a book, speaking of this book, Allie here, Real Femme Sapien, recommended the book to me, is The Proper Feeding and Care of Husbands by Laura Schlesinger, I believe that's her name.
Yeah.
And she gives
it's okay. I don't like it that much.
I like it.
I don't know. That book's okay though. That book's okay.
I think a woman following the advice in that book versus what she's doing now is infinitely better.
I do agree with that statement.
So that's why I look at it.
I think Allie could write a better book. Allie, write a better book. Quit dicking around.
So that being said, but she does give an analogy kind of the similar one. You say it's like something like, women get on this department store and it's like, this is the husband department store. And if you go to the second floor, these are all good looking men and they're going to take care of you and love you for the rest of your life. But if you go up to the third floor, these are all good looking men. They're all 6 foot tall. And then women are like, okay, well, if you go up to the fourth floor, they're all good looking. They're 6 foot tall and they're all rich. They go up to the fifth floor. You're all good looking, 6 foot floor, 6 foot tall, rich, and they're great in bed. And then they go up to the next floor and there's nothing there. And they're like, you bitches are, you're too greedy. So, like the general psychology of women, like they just always, I think it's tied into one, women's insecurity, and two, women's need, like insatiable need for security and safety. Because I think a woman thinks, I just got to choose the best man possible, no matter what, because I'm so terrified of anything going wrong. So I just need the best.
Well, it's instinct. It's instinct. But we have to recognize that, okay, our instincts can't be in the driver's seat. My chimpanzee cannot be driving my brain, or I am going to fucking clobber and pillage. You know what I mean? My chimpanzee is really savage, dude. Like he's not even a chimp. He's a gorilla and he's pissed off and he wants to fuck everything. Like I can't let him drive. He needs to be in the back seat and I let him out every now and then to intimidate the normies and I put him back. That's how that goes. And a woman's chimpanzee is like, hey, what's around this corner? Let me go check that out. Let me go see what the next thing is. It's not to train women to settle better necessarily, but it's to train women to think just in terms of more long-term with their sexual strategy. That's all. Don't settle with somebody that's not good for you, but there's other, we'll talk off. Like there's other things like that. I liked her show for a bit and then I can see some massive.
I just like how she holds women accountable. She's like,
she does. I do like that.
More. It's not that hard.
Right.
Stay home and read a book. Play Scrabble, ho. Like,
my problem with her is the same problem I have with a lot of people in the internet space that get very popular. Is they're very black and white and draconian. You know what I mean? So if a girl, Now, you're not even that much though. Like, it's like if a girl has a kid, for example, she's like, well, no, you're not allowed to, touch another penis until the kid is 18. That's the choices you made. And it's like, I get it, but come on. You know what I mean? That's not, see, so her view can be a little bit, that's my problem with her view, is a lot of times it's a little bit more draconian, which then it's the equivalent of me telling a guy, you know what? Women can be, damaged by notches. So if she has more than 3 bodies, you better reject her. Okay. See, we have a fact and some truths, like, yeah, if a woman has a kid, she's got to be responsible for the kid first and all that, and not invite toxic men in that kid's life. That's a truth. But then, like, we take the truth to an extreme where now it's a damaging strategy to the woman and the kid, in fact, for her not to consider dating at all, in my opinion. For a guy to not consider a woman who's had sex with like more than 3 people is a damaging strategy to that guy, because he could pick a toxic person just because she has 2 bodies. You know what I mean? She has 2 bodies because she's a nightmare to be with and has psychological problems, and he picks her because of the number. It doesn't look at stuff. So we have to get away from, draconian, rules and start getting better skills. That's why you do Masculine Power Network. That's why I have my mastermind group. What saves you isn't a draconian rule. What saves you is your skills. When you have skills in how to connect with people and understand people, you can tell this girl just ain't going to be a good person for you to match with. So I need to pick this other one.
I want to knock this out because I want to go to the Jordan Peterson clip too. So take a look, but going back to here, even though it's women who had 2 partners had a 30%, the second highest divorce rates in the table. The highest 5-year divorce rates of all associated with marrying in the 2000s, having 10 or more. I mean, really, shocker alert, right? The highest 5-year divorce rates of all are associated with marrying in the 2000s and having 10 or more premarital sex partners, 33%. Perhaps it is not unexpected that having many partners increases the odds of divorce. The greater the surprise is that this only holds true in recent years. Previously, women with 2 partners prior to marriage had the highest divorce rates, but the times were different. The internet was present in this time, extremely prevalent. And then Instagram came out, what, 2011, 12, right?
I don't know. You're asking. I barely know how to work my internet.
We don't love you for your internet skills. We love you for your knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's take a look here. How can these findings be explained? It's easier to make sense of the low divorce rates of people with minimal sexual experience prior to marriage. Obviously, one of the most common reasons for premarital abstinence is religion, and the NSFG data support such an interpretation. Figure 2 right here shows that women who marry as virgins are far more likely than other women to attend church at least once a week. It's also, and this kind of ties in. Did you even know that the church was in this? When you mentioned church? Okay, cool.
Yeah, because so IFS is sort of more traditionally conservatively biased, which is fine. It's just everyone has a bias. That's their bias. Now, one thing I will say is, the thing that they're not recognizing that, is being pointed out and sort of thrown around on Twitter actually a little bit is that the churches, again, have covertly sabotaged themselves with this. It used to be, that women stayed, truthful, stayed what do you call it, not promiscuous, we'll say, and tried to be more like virgins, stuff like that, because of their religious beliefs. But now, even though that's promoted as that's the best way to go, covertly it's but we're gonna forgive you and you'll be just fine if you don't do that. And they need to steer their message a bit. Yes, God forgives you and we're still going to love you. However, there's biological damage here, and there's psychological damage, behavioral damage. And that is something that you can't just undo by asking for forgiveness. And so that's where they miss it.
I think the church, I'm going to be honest, because, I used to be in the Pentecostal church. I was in school to be a priest, right?
Yeah.
And
that's a rough one. Girls aren't even allowed to cut their hair in that one.
Well, the thing is this, the church totally sold out for money.
Yeah, of course.
And they don't want to tell women, hey, listen, like, you know, you're maybe a born again virgin, but you still have to like, you still are, like have whore tendencies that you need to work on. They don't tell them that because they want them there every Sunday feeling good, giving donations, right?
Right.
In addition to that, like now, you know, the church in the United States is like, oh yeah, we can have gay pastors and transgender pastors and lesbian pastors. Like, dude, have you fucking read the Bible? Like, that's like against the doctrine. Like,
Right.
you guys are selling out for money, and then the whole philosophy of the church is just thrown out the window for money. Like the one thing Jesus got violent for in the fucking Bible was like chasing people out of the temples who were profiting
Putting
off
profit
of,
over their message. Yep.
yeah, because they were saying like, oh, this sacrifice you brought is like unclean, so you got to buy like our clean sacrifice to the Lord. And Jesus saw them doing that and chased
the
he
money.
like,
Yeah.
and he got the whip and he beat them up and threw them out the temple.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm going to go back to this chart here because this is absolutely correlated as well. It is noteworthy that virgin marriages increasingly became the domain of religious women between the 1980s and 2000s, and during those same years, the divorce rate for virgin brides continued to drop. These findings make sense in the light of the fact that people who attend church frequently have lower divorce rates than do non-participants. In addition to that, there's a study I just read. I couldn't find the actual study, but it's in the book, The Molecule of More. Talking about dopamine. Have you read that? I know I sent it to you.
Yep.
So the study showed that conservative women cheat on their husbands less, have more satisfying sex, and also have an overall better sense of happiness. They also orgasm more than women who frequently engage in liberal amounts of sex. And that's another thing I've noticed too. When I came to Japan, right? Because when I left America, I've slept with 60 something chicks at that time coming to Japan. And I had noticed that when I came to Japan, girls here orgasm way more frequently. And it's not like I don't need to jackhammer these girls and like whip out my fucking machine and, plow away at their fucking tattered clitoris. Like, you got to do so much shit to make these girls off in America because they're just like
right.
fucking war vets.
I know. I have to threaten them with their lives and light them on fire.
Girls here in Tokyo or Japan, because I've been on the west side and the east side and the south side. These girls are having orgasms within 6 to 10 minutes of penetrative sex. You know what I mean? And again, that ties into everything that all this data is slowly coming out. And like I said, eventually it's going to get to a point where an AI is going to be able to like analyze a girl. Like, this girl's a whore. She's been ran through, and the probability of her success in a relationship is like close to zero. Abort, right?
Oh boy, we'll go to China route and have a social credit score. They'll have an SMV credit score.
It's gonna happen.
You know what I mean?
Happen.
Beep, 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 304, 304. Just an alarm goes off and you're like, oh shit. And we're ending this coffee date.
Going back here too, right? Generally speaking, women who have multiple sex partners are less likely to be regular churchgoers. They're also less likely to be happier and stuff. Like I said, morality has been stripped away from America, and it all started with them saying like God isn't real. You gotta believe in science, and science has kind of become the new God, and that's really gone out the window. One thing I do want to do real quick, I want to play this Jordan Peterson clip because it talks about it. This is kind of segueing into why women are more promiscuous nowadays, why they're more promiscuous, and why they're more cold-hearted, narcissistic, self-centered bitches. This is pretty well done. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'm gonna here. I'll just screen share right now for you guys. Let me just give me 1 second. This is on Sky News. This was posted 8 days ago for you guys there. But it says, clinical psychologist and public intellectual Dr. Jordan Peterson says social media enables female antisocial behavior. Female hyper users of Instagram are also sadistic, Machiavellian, psychopathic, and narcissistic, and they optimize for short-term mating strategy, so they're promiscuous. Antisocial people, broadly speaking, have more sexual partners. They start engaging in sex earlier. They're more callous in their utilization of themselves than others. So everything that you didn't even know I was going to bring up this part and talk to you about this, but everything you said during this broadcast, it actually correlates perfectly with this interview that was just put out a couple of days ago. I watched this. This was just automatically fed to me on YouTube. So the YouTube algorithm is doing something right.
Yeah.
But truly fascinating shit. You're going to love this. Let's pay attention.
We've got right now this fascinating phenomenon, world's richest man saying he wants to restore truth to Twitter and trust to Twitter.
Yeah.
It's the public square now. It's how people communicate, find news. You were personally impacted by Twitter's left-leaning, censorious ways. You've now been restored. What impact do you think Twitter becoming an even playing field will have for...
Who knows? I mean, I'm hoping... I know people who know Elon Musk very well, who've worked for him, and these are very able people, to say the least. And they really admire him. He has the ability to do exactly what he did. He went into Twitter and he said, he's a good observer of the Pareto principle. A small minority of people do all the productive work. It's like, all you people, you're gone. And he just does it. It's like, and everybody who's whiny and complaining whines and complains about that. And no doubt some people who were doing a credible job were also let go, because it's a pretty broad swath, let's say. But he's got rid of 75% of the people, and Twitter is still working.
With record traffic.
Right, exactly. And so I think he will, and apparently he's also put the boots to the people who are trafficking in child sexual exploitation already.
Incredible.
Right, no kidding. No kidding. Incredible in two ways. Incredible that he did it, but even more incredible that he could do it that fast and that it hadn't been done. Right. So, and Musk also, it seems to me that the evidence is quite clear that he not only has a pretty good eye, but he is capable of learning. So he'll experiment and he'll learn from his experiments, and we'll see if he can clean up Twitter. That's tough. I'm afraid, deeply afraid, that virtualization enables psychopathy, and that might be a fatal problem socially as we move towards a more virtualized world. It's not easy to keep the Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic sadists under control. They're a small proportion of the population, but it's all about them and their short-term needs, and they'll do anything to make those paramount. It looks to me that when we virtualize the world, we take all the constraints off those people, and that's not good. So, for example, on social media, all the power's in the hands of the accusers. Well, that's not good. You know, believe all women. It's like, yeah, fair enough, except it's believe most women. As soon as it's all, it's like, yeah, well, what about the psychopaths? Well, they don't exist. It's like, oh, you wouldn't say that if you ever met one. So if you think that all people who are malevolent are only victims,
Yeah.
you're naive and fortunate, and you better wake up, because one of these days someone like that's going to come and knock on your door, and you are going to be one sorry person. So, and it's very difficult to keep that 5% of the population regulated. All their regulation is external, because they have no internal regulation. And I don't see that we have any ability to regulate that online, and we reward it, right? We reward it with attention, we monetize it. This could be, see, I actually think that's what's driving polarization. I don't think polarization is real in some sense. I think it's all driven by undue attention paid to dark tetrad, Machiavellian, narcissistic, psychopathic sadists. And that's polluting, because they communicate in an untrammeled manner in the virtual world. And because we're so virtualized, we think that's how the world is. It isn't, but we're reacting to it as if it is.
Is there a disproportionate number of those people in the media, perhaps? Is that
definitely.
part of the reason?
Oh yeah, anywhere where there's a lot of public attention available. Yeah, politics, entertainment, media, anywhere where people have the privilege of being in the public eye. Yeah, that's exactly, the psychopaths will invade that for sure. Now, that doesn't mean that all the people in those industries have that characteristic. I would say that's a lurking temptation for people who have a talent in that direction, right? Because every temperament is going to come with its own temptations. And to be a person like you, say, although I'm not saying this about you necessarily, although it's probably true about you too, is that you're very likely to be extroverted and disagreeable. If you weren't extroverted, you wouldn't have that verbal fluency, and you wouldn't be comfortable in the public eye. And if you weren't disagreeable, you wouldn't challenge people. Okay, so what's the problem with being extroverted and disagreeable? Well, it tilts you towards narcissism. Now, there are ways that can be regulated. Maybe you're enmeshed in good social arrangements, right? So you have a husband, say, who helps keep you sane, and children and friends, and they help box you in. Maybe you're conscientious and And so there are, and like I said, every temperamental variant has its attendant temptations, but it's definitely the case that social media rewards disagreeable extroverted people, and it also disinhibits all the temptations that are associated with that. It's not good. And the research on this is becoming quite clear, by the way. So we know that female hyper users of Instagram are also, they're sadistic, Machiavellian, psychopathic, and narcissistic, and they optimize for short-term mating strategies. So they're promiscuous, and that's a marker for antisocial behavior. So antisocial people, broadly speaking, have more sexual partners. They start engaging in sex earlier. They're more callous in their utilization of themselves than others. And so,
would you call that toxic femininity? Is there such a thing as toxic
absolutely.
femininity?
We know what toxic femininity is.
Okay.
It's the female version of antisocial behavior is reputation savaging. Yeah. Gossip, innuendo, backbiting, and females can be very good at that. Now, men can do that too, and they do, especially on social media. But it's definitely the case that social media enables female antisocial type behavior, clearly. And so it scales. We were talking about whether the feminine ethos scales. Feminine pathology scales magnificently on social media. And so God only knows what the consequence of that's going to be. And that's part of cancel culture. It's like, well, we can't confront you directly, but we can sure take you out behind the scenes. And that's everyone familiar with junior high culture among teenage girls knows what.
So when I
that's
heard
such
that,
a really good observation.
It's fucking super terrifyingly based. But it's true. Like, these chicks, like it does enable these short mating term strategies, right? Because they're just so self-absorbed on wanting what they want at that moment without fully understanding the consequences of getting what they think they want at the time. Does that make sense when I say that?
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, it's quite a tricky bag of things we got to deal with as modern men jumping through all these hoops. But I mean, like I said, the data's there, and I think we all kind of knew this as men instinctually. Like a girl that's like hyper addicted to Instagram for me is like a fucking red flag. Like,
huge,
super red flag.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's just, you're just fueling, and you're feeding into parts of your brain that causes behaviors that would make you not a good partner for somebody in a long-term relationship, is what it boils down to. And not having like happiness and like satisfaction, like a deep satisfaction. It's one thing to want to chase, like you can chase success and also be deeply satisfied. You know what I mean? That deep sense of serenity and satisfaction comes from removing toxic patterns out of your life. And then the motivation to do whatever your drive is and to be better at that can allow you to be greatly successful. You can wake up with a good feeling about who you are and where your environment and, and how your life's going, and yet still chase excellence and do really well. You don't have to be a retiree is on the way dying to death, and you women lose that deep satisfaction when they're constantly on the internet looking at a better life somewhere else, because their brain is wired to push towards a better thing in more of a anxious, erratic way. I mean, that's what hypergamy is. It's like, it's a threat to their safety almost to not try to go for the next best thing. And it's not their safety. It's actually a threat to their mating, their genetic mating abilities, right? To settle with a guy who's less than a guy that she could have had means that her babies are going to be less genetically viable. So when it comes to selfish gene and gene theory and stuff like that, it's innately, it innately brings a feeling of threat to them to be with this settled guy and to not go elsewhere. But the problem is, of course, that's all very subjective too. These are just drives. That there's not the objectivity to it. And it's certainly when you go on Instagram, there's no objectivity. You're getting a sliver of somebody's life that her girlfriend's experiencing when she shows all of her pictures with, you know, jet setting the world, or, you know, with her husband and her dog or whatever. You're not getting the full picture of what their life is like. You're getting a sliver of it. And so in her mind, she subjectively magnifies the success that other people are having and feels inadequate and feels anxious over that success, regardless of where she is. She could be in a nice life with a guy who makes an excess of figures and makes her feel good. And if she is perpetually on social media looking outward at other women and other situations, she's going to look towards the better situations and wonder if she could have that and be unsatisfied with her current situation. That's what social media in excess does to a woman's brain. It's really damaging, you know? So she's got to limit it, and she's got to direct it in a positive direction for herself, just like men do, just like anybody does. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think we have had a pretty fruitful conversation here. And
hell yeah, always do.
If anybody tells you body count doesn't matter, make sure you just tell them,
shut up, bitch.
Okay, and just refer them to this podcast, because it absolutely matters. And it's not, you know, it does. Listen, an extremely high body count for men affects us negatively as well. Men have a threshold too.
It does.
And this is why I tell guys, and I think, Paul, you haven't really gone publicly saying this, but you're also in the school of thought that eventually you got to like get out as a man. You can't just be doing this infinite player thing and womanizing for the rest of your life, because it's going to fucking destroy you.
Yeah. I mean, I would say in most cases, that's the case. I try to tell people how to live their lives and what to do. But reality is, for what most guys want, a perpetual player strategy is going to fail for them eventually.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be 80 years old, you know, playing on girls, maybe, but probably not. You know what I mean? At some point, a guy wants to have some, and it has to do with having somebody that you can trust as you age with the life you're building. When you're 21, you don't have a life you've built. You don't have any value yet, you know, so you don't care. When you're 45, 50, it's like, I've built a life here. And when a girl enters into that life, like if a girl enters into my life, right, she's won the damn jackpot. She's won lottery.
Right.
And so it's like, that's something I need to protect more now.
Right.
And I can, you know, and so my choices are to have only short-term relationships with no connection with women. You know what I mean? And not having those, because the intensity of sex and the intensity of, you know, goes up with the intensity of the connection. So even if guys just want to drain their balls all the time, when you have a girl that you're really into and she's really into you and has that neurochemical connection, the draining your balls experience is much more intense and better. Right. You really don't want to go back to just random one night stands and bitches, you know, and all that stuff. I mean, it's fun to do every now and then, but, you know, after a moment, you know, just a moment of, you know, just like going out, right? Like, as you get older, you're like, it's fun to go out sometimes, but I'd rather have more chill, you know, sort of a life. You're not going out 4 nights a week when you're 40, 50 years old, right? Yeah. And so it's like, at some point, you know, you want your peace, you want your deep satisfaction that I just talked about earlier. And you're not, you know, and you have things to protect. You have resources, assets, and a future to protect, and you have a lot to offer. My girls, you know, people ask, why does a very beautiful, and my girlfriend's hot and 25 years old, I'm gonna be 45 here in a couple months. Why does she choose a guy like me? She's won there's 10 more just like her in line, right? That I didn't pick because she's the better choice for me. Why? Because it's like walking in and winning the damn lottery in the sexual marketplace for somebody who would be, you know, attracted to my type, right? It's winning the lottery. I have all of those things that women want, pretty much, you know, the resources, the stable life, the, you know, the sex game, all the shit. So why am I going to just squander that on women who don't appreciate it?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you get into that kind of thing, and then the sex isn't even, you go through so many girls, it's like, I would rather have a really intense experience with somebody I give a shit about.
Right.
And this is why PUAs tend to get girlfriends. You know what I mean? They tend to get in relationships. And a lot of times the PUAs don't have relationship game. They've only had the skills to sort of get a girl to sleep with them at a bar or something. And then they're good with those skills. But once they get in a relationship, they lose it. And this is what we've seen with some very, very good, we use the mystery as an example, got into it with a girl and lost his damn mind because he didn't have the relationship management skills. He was needing and wanting that connection and that deeper connection with a person that he could trust and have higher emotional and sexual experiences with that person. As a PUA, I mean, that guy could do whatever, in the marketplace. He was very good at his time with pickup. Out in California, he had hot girls. He could have playered himself into in perpetuity. But instead, what happened, right? He was in a relationship and he didn't have the management skills. So what happened? He almost lost his damn life in that situation. And that's not, I can start naming pickup artist after pickup artist. They get in a relationship and they lose their shit because their frame isn't good in the relationship. They've erroneously thought their pickup skills would drive them through something long-term. They're wrong.
PUAs are actually pretty bad at relationships.
They tend to be, and that's because why? Short-term mating strategies. They're now working on the skills you need in order to patiently handle a woman and keep that shit together long-term. And they're also dying for an emotional, deeper sexual connection. You go through so many notches. It's like, I want something more meaningful after a point. And people who want to like listen to me say that go, oh, gee, maybe I'm just being beta-tized or something. They're fucking chumping out, dude. I know that they don't fuck. When guys say that, I know don't fuck. How do you tell me you don't fuck without saying it? Saying that I'm somehow beta-tizing myself by wanting a girl I could trust and build something more long-term with. I say that because when you fuck, you go through a bunch of girls and you get it out of your system and then you go, yeah, dude, there's got to be something more than this. Yeah. This has become more of a distraction now rather than a compliment. And then you see people in relationships where they have a higher, set of emotions for that girl and the girl has a higher set of emotions for them. And you're like, yeah, that looks better. You know what I mean? And that happens to a guy with a lot of sexual options after executing him. So when a guy says, oh, that's simping out, that's you're beta, you're just becoming beta-tized in an older age. It's like, no, you just don't fuck. You haven't gone through enough experiences to really in a meaningful way. You haven't had that girl who would slit her wrist to be with you situation. Like she is fucking like, holy shit, this guy's my whole life right now. That's where my desire is. You haven't had that experience. And until you have that experience, it's a girl that you feel like you put some trust into. You don't want to go back from that. You know what I mean? You don't want to just a short-term whatever to be the rest of your life. And that's usually what happens to most guys.
And then, so the thing is this too, right? To top it off, going back to why a body count that's high is detrimental for women. You said this, right? When a woman gets with a guy like us, it's a jackpot, really.
Yeah.
A woman with a high body count will not be able to realize that. More importantly, not be able to feel that.
Yes, that's the really big problem, is that the emotions are not going to be there. And remember, for girls, the emotions are their truth most of the time. And so when she just doesn't feel it, and it's like, that's her truth now. And you can try to reason with her and tell her, well, this is your neurological system and you need to do some things to kind of recover and get more long-term strategies going on in your behaviors and try to, find a way to be satisfied in a long-term situation because you're not conditioned for that. Like you can have all these conversations to try to steer her into doing some self-work, but she won't do it because her emotions are her truth and she doesn't feel it. And that that dangerously often doesn't come until later, you know, because the honeymoon phase, they can do that part. So it's later, it's 3 months, 6 months after you got married to her. And then she's like, this is why we look at relationships after the 2-year mark to measure long-term relationships, because the first 2 years you're dealing with a honeymoon phase, and it's a whole different set of conditions there for her. Newness, you know, variety. What happens when that variety is of new partners, the new partner variety is no longer prevalent in a relationship? Does she still have the neurochemical reaction to keep her motivated and, you know, sexually desiring and wanting that guy's presence with that oxytocin? She's been through a lot of guys. So it's very, very compromised, you know?
Yep. So that being said, man, I think we covered this pretty well. Again, guys, don't forget, we're going to be talking about this in far more detail, talking about how to cheat-proof your relationship, all these things at the Masculine Empowerment Network. So go and get on the waiting list right now, because December 29th, we are having a 5-day enrollment period. And then after the enrollment is finished, we start on January 9th. So you can start off your new year right, getting all the education you need, joining a group of 200 plus men who are all red-pilled, all on the same page, wanting to maximize their life, take everything to the next level, money, muscles, game frame. You also get a Telegram chat, and you get my newest course, the Dark Pass Harem. And that teaches you about how to date multiple women at the same time, so you can eventually source a good woman out of that. Go to the masculineempowermentnetwork.com, get on the waiting list. And until then, we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.